You would say your name and where you live, and try to keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. That would be excellent. And also, if you are with us digitally, if you would change your name if you can to your first and last name so I can address you properly, that would be great. And I think that is all the things I have to say. We'll start with folks in person. Anybody like to make a comment? Go ahead.
Stephen Whitaker. I just want to point out the impact of kicking the homelessness task force can down the road another week. There's a particular, the Christchurch agreement. This is a city-funded cooperative venture with Good Samaritan to have a shelter at Christchurch. Recording in progress. That agreement was contingent upon there being day warming space. I'm told that it wasn't until today that the agreement with the Green Mountain Transit has been signed. I still don't have a copy of that, but there's a particular person staying at Christchurch who has been no trespassed and is left out in the cold. And our safety net cannot tolerate that. We have leverage, it's our building. We are negotiating the terms. We're paying city money to clean it and provide toilets. We need to lift the no trespass order for the woman. I'm watching her deteriorate. Her spiritual and mental health is deteriorating daily. Okay, so this is not something that can be ignored. Restroom City Hall, for y'all to ignore that repeatedly, be deceived about the costs of securing the main hallway is callous indifference and selfish. Plain out selfish. People who are out on the streets need bathrooms. I appreciate and I want to thank you for the action in Cameron's offer to set up the recording and the laptop and the audio for the CVPSA meeting last Thursday night. Unfortunately, the doors were locked. You need to take action. The door locking of the city hall when public meetings needs to be managed daily. And I think it's too complex or too inconsistent for Burtis or VC3 to handle. I think it should be handled either by the city manager's office or the city clerk's office and programmed for a specific time after the last scheduled meeting to automatically lock the doors. But as a fail-safe, the automatic paddle, the handicap paddle should work, and a sign put there saying if it's after hours, use the handicap paddle. And then the handicap paddle gets locked as of the end of the last meeting. This is all doable, but in effect, there was a violation of open meeting law again by CVPSA to conduct a meeting with those doors locked. The state legislature would have halted the proceedings. And then what's worse, she refused to avail herself of the city laptop and speakers, and then the battery went dead, disconnecting the chair from the meeting. So it's just a farce of technical and desire to adhere to the law. I think that's enough. I probably used up my 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone with us online wish to make a comment? You can raise your hand using the raise hand icon, which is under reactions. You could also just wave, or you can unmute yourself and let us know that you want to speak. Anyone with us digitally wish to say anything? Okay, I am not seeing anybody. So we are going to move on then. All right. So on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move the consent agenda as published.
I'll second it. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? All right, so we do have an appointment to make. We've got an appointment to make to the Public Art Commission. And I believe there is just the one person, and I don't see Jesse Jacobs with us digitally, but I could be wrong. So, yeah, I don't think he is here. So, is there a motion regarding this appointment? Go
I
ahead,
move
Connor.
that we go into executive session to discuss the appointment of a public officer or employee pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so, all right, we will be back. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, Jack, go ahead.
I move we appoint Jesse Jacobs to the Public Art Commission.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, thank you, Jesse. We are grateful that you're stepping up for that. It's great. All right, so we are on to the bulk of what we're going to be talking about this evening, which is the budget. And we should have all received the Excel file in which you can enter different things and play with numbers, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you, Kelly, for putting that together. So to start off, I think, well, I'm going to ask staff to start us off at least with
Sure.
what they have. Yeah.
So we don't have a lot, obviously we gave you the big overview presentation last meeting. Hopefully you've had a chance to pick up budget book for those of you that wanted the official book. If you don't, we can get it to you. It's also all online and was sent to you electronically. And it's really our presentation to you. You have all the information. We're here to answer any questions, clarify anything that you want, and help you through the discussion, but we won't lead you because you've got to get where you want to go. We have Kelly's here. The department heads are almost all online if you have specific questions about anything. And, we can put the spreadsheet up, the working spreadsheet up on the screen if necessary. We have sheets about the capital plan and the various funding, what's in those, if people want those. So we can provide some of the detail for visual if you'd like. Other than that, we're here to support you as you discuss and decide and get where you need to go.
Great. Do you all want to talk at all about the CIP stuff specifically, or no?
Was that addressed to staff?
Yes.
Not, we're happy to talk about any portion of the budget.
Okay.
It'd be good to know where the council would like to focus its attention. So,
Okay.
we assume we will be explaining it at some point tonight.
Yeah, I think we should probably start with that if that is okay.
Unless anybody wants to. There's other places. Yeah, sure.
Is that all right, team? If we start with that, I realize that is, it is a big portion of the budget, but it's just a part of the budget. I'm imagining that we'll go from there into. I just want to hear from every individual, if you are up for it, to tell us about like what you how you're reacting to this budget. What would you like to see in terms of changes, additions, subtractions, etc. And we'll sort of collect all of our thoughts and then go from there. Does that sound like an okay plan, team? Any other suggestions? Open to suggestions. Okay. All right, let's start with that. If
Start with
that's
the budget?
yeah.
Start with capital? Okay,
Yeah.
Give Kelly a chance to get fired up here.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just pull up a summary sheet of the capital fund and what's sort of in and sort of identified online. But the sheet hopefully will help with just some clarity around where the items align within the different buckets of funding.
And I think it's worth noting too, that I think it's super helpful to understand like what's in the city budget, and then with ARPA funds, like how the staff is proposing what falls into what bucket. So I think that Kelly, I appreciate that. And I think that really makes a lot of sense in terms of how we approach this.
Yes. So the sheet I have up here is a sort of compilation of all of the items. It's a little bit small, so I will try to expand it a little bit. But in this first column right here, and I'll get into the details, but just the way that this is set up, we've got the traditional capital funding, and then so on throughout the sheet, water sewer bond items, then ARPA, and then our CIP, restoration fund money. And so just kind of taking it from a higher level overview within the budget
Kelly?
book. Yes,
I hate to interrupt, but could you also share that?
this sheet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. Let me actually. I'm gonna pause for just a minute. Would it be okay to email it to everybody?
Well, I
No,
think you
she
must
means-
share
oh,
on the
share
screen.
Share it on
screen?
the screen.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Thank you. Sorry.
'Cause I think people who are watching on Zoom also probably have an
yes.
easier time reading it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Share screen. All right, excellent.
Thanks.
No problem. And so a lot of this detail can also be found on the CIP section of the budget that's online. And then also within that category, there's also a breakdown of, sort of what's in, what's out. And so that's helpful. But this master sheet is really what we use for deliberations internally as a team. Just trying to get this to load here. And so just as I'm sort of getting into this list that we've got on the screen, there's also one that is online, but just a higher level overview. The debt service, well, let me back up, sorry. So the total CIP plan for FY23 is about 2.149 million. And that is comprised of debt service, which is $716,000 or so. Then the total annual capital projects is just over $1 million. And then equipment we've got slated for traditional capital, that is of 359,548. And so that's where the plan comes from. And so just jumping over here into this sheet, this is what has sort of been identified as what's in and what's out. I'm not able to move this mouse. Sorry, everyone.
It's because the thing is.
Yeah. So what I want to do here is just jump on down to the bottom. It's not helpful. Need the mouse here. Actually, I'm going to take this out for a minute here. Sorry, guys. And stop the share so that I can actually use the mouse on this machine. Sort of spoke a little too soon there. Hold on. Just want to make sure this is the right version. It's actually not the right version of the sheet. So hold on. I downloaded this before I came on. So let me make sure I've got the right version. That's better. Sorry, guys. Let me share my screen again here. Okay, now I'm ready. Okay, sorry about that. Because I was like, this just doesn't look as pretty as the one that, you know, was the final version. So let's just back up here a little bit. So in summary, just going over what's in here, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm just gonna go over what's in each of the items. And then from there, if there are questions, we can get into that. So just starting here, on line 7, we've got some tree care equipment for $3,000. There are tree guards for $5,000. There's some bike path or path money here for $5,000. And then this is a combination also, I should mention, of both equipment and project. So in this left-hand corner for me, where there's the type and it's indicated with a P or an E, that's, you know, what it is. So it's equipment for an E and P is project. So we've got a parks truck for $5,000. We've got some tree grates for $8,000. Then large parks for $10,000. Then we've got the Berry Street bike path for $20,000. We've got crack seal for $20,000. And then moving on down here to fire equipment. This includes the lease payments for the new engine, ambulance, and for the power stretchers. So this really actually is about $15,000 worth of equipment for the fire department. The other is really lease payments. Then moving on to the parks and trees truck 3, you'll notice as I go down the line, there's a lot of equipment on this list. As we're working towards getting things back up and running. Then on to the Route 2 Town Line Bridge for $27,500. There's a DPW 2x4 pickup truck for $30,000. Then there's the Main Street Sidewalk Improvement Project for $50,000. There's some money in here for IT infrastructure investments. for 53,000. Again, in this column, these are all traditional capital funds. So the summary that I gave at the beginning, these are all kind of incorporated into that. And then I'll get on to the other buckets as we get underway here. Then we've got the F550 from DPW for 65,000 or so. We've got fog seal for 65,000. There's $75,000 in here for project and engineering support to go along with a lot of the big projects that we've got going right now. Then we've got vehicle replacement for the police department for 76.5. And then you'll notice here as we sort of break away this Marvin Street slope failure, as we get into these other columns here, you can see how they've been identified within the bond category rather than just a traditional capital category. So that's going to be happening as well, but I'll cover those in summary after I go through the traditional capital list. Then there is some money in here for ADA compliance, $100,000, which covers projects within City Hall. Then there is funding for year 2 of the contract for the reappraisal. We also are working to set a reserve in place so that in future years when we have a reappraisal, there won't be such a hit in a contract cost. So we're trying to pivot there, but for this reappraisal, we're taking it within the capital fund. And then we've got $505,000 for cold in place recycling. And so this along with the fog sealing and crack sealing goes towards trying to reach the 70 pavement condition index number that the council is really looking to do. There's also other money within the capital funding and other buckets to reach that goal too. And so our intent is that in the future we'll be standing this up even further. It'll take about 3 to 4 years to reach that goal, but we're working towards it. Then we've got $50,000 here for trail building. And then on down to the list. So you can see
Which
that
is
we
building trails, not a trail building.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And so as I'm scrolling down here, you can kind of see the number of projects that are on this list. Some of them are funded with other buckets of money, but there's a lot that, you may not be funded. We tried our best, but some things will have to wait. And so just scrolling down here, the total within this traditional capital category is about $1.4 million or so. There's an additional $150,000 here that you see at the bottom, which is for the wastewater sewer trucks that we talked about at the CIP meeting. So there were some purchases there, and I'll just scroll up so you can see them. So there's $40,000 here. Oh, and also the Vector. I'm glad I'm scrolling up because I don't want to miss anything. There's also a dump truck and a few other items here, 2 pickup trucks sort of on tap within sort of this traditional category. And so just taking it back up to the top here so you can see, you don't need to go all the way back to the top because there's not anything else in bonding, but you'll note what I've done also too is I've color coded the bonds within this bond category because we discussed at the capital committee meeting pairing bonding together in certain packages. And so I've identified based on the listing and based on committee feedback for different bond items. And so we can get into that. But this first is shaded in this color here. It looks kind of peach up there, kind of purple over here, but you get the gist. So there's the Marvin Street slope failure. There's $250,000 in here as part of the energy net zero plan. Or another alternative to that plan could potentially be using some of the energy returns, the methane from the water recovery resource facility energy output. So that's an option too. Yes.
I'm just noticing that is also, that line is combined with ADA compliance. And I just don't remember that being combined with ADA compliance.
It's not. I was just trying to keep it, I was trying not to add an additional line.
Okay.
It's not. Sorry about that.
And because I just want to point out, that as far as I recall, the energy upgrade that we were discussing was about $250,000.
Mhm.
And that's all.
And that's okay.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
And actually, you know, I was like, it's just one line. I can amend the sheet pretty
Yeah.
easily, and I just didn't do it. So sorry about that.
No,
But
that's okay. No, that's
thanks
all
for
right.
asking.
Yeah, no problem.
And so then just scrolling down here, we've got $550,000 for the Main and Berry Street intersection. Also, I'll take a minute to note that online with the capital improvement items that are listed, you can drill into those and take a look at the components and the notes that staff has submitted on those projects. So, and also locations, there's a mapping component to that too. So then moving on, these are all the same shade, by the way. We've got lighting conversion for 250,000, Confluence Park for 600,000. And I'm just gonna, and that is all that we have with that particular shade. Then we've got the Recreation Center land purchase for 1.5 million. And then in this first blue bar is East State Street. And so that's about 7.2 million. There is some grant funding associated with that, so that'll be a little bit less, but we just put the full amount here so you can see what the project cost would be in total. And then moving down here, you can see phase 2 of the water resource recovery dryer project that was discussed at the last meeting. So that's captured in full here. There was some conversation about whether or not we would use some of the bond capacity left over from phase 1. And we're, looking into that a little bit. It may be a good idea to consider just putting this all on the ballot as the 16.5, so that then, we are calling that out as the total cost of the project. And then also if there are any overruns, then we would have a little bit of breathing room. Just want to make sure that we have enough because it's such a big project. And then lastly on the list here is the TIF garage repayment that, we'll work on getting squared away in short order so that we can kind of clear that from the general fund since we're no longer moving forward with that. So you can see with the 2 bond lists, we've got the 8.4, almost 5 for, sort of the non-water sewer bonds, and then 19.7 for the water sewer related items. That includes the East State Street portion and phase 2. So then I've also got this split up into sort of other one-time monies that are of exception. Getting ARPA funding is pretty fantastic. You'll note down here at the bottom, what I've done is I've noted what we've received to date. We also have done the lost revenue calculations put out through the league and GFOA, which is the Government Finance Association, just to make sure that we're in compliance and could claim up to this first allotment of money in lost revenue. And that's the most broad category of the ARPA funding. The rest of it is, pretty specific. And so there are guardrails around that funding, although it does support water sewer infrastructure. And so you'll see in our planning what that looks like as I get into my sheets a little bit more here. But in summary, just coming up to the top here for ARPA, just so we can kind of see what's in that phase 1 bucket. I have another sheet that I'll show you that has phase 2 ARPA and then also has some of the CIP reserve monies called out. So just scrolling up here, we've got a cemetery truck, and I'll also note in this first list, these are items that were delayed due to COVID. And so we're restoring funding for projects and equipment that we had already sort of said were a go, but then held back because of just the COVID impacts and mitigation plans. So we've got money in here for large park work. We've got $40,000 in here for fire EMS for truck replacement. We've got $135,000 in here for a couple of cruisers along with the fit ups that go along with that. Scrolling down here. We've got for Granite Street, the storm lining, $85,000. We've got $30,000 for parks and trees for the staff bathroom. That's been on the list and kind of an item ongoing. And then we've got Phelps Street storm replacement for $90,000. We've got a truck for recreation for $70,000. And then we've got a street sweeper replacement for 275. This next one is a big one, and it's one that we've been trying to figure out how to manage. We've got a grant associated with this, so the total project cost on Grout Road Bridge is $507,000. The amount that would go towards or be spent out of ARPA would be $332,000, and so we would be able to get that project done and off our books. It's been kind of hanging out there for quite some time, as I understand it. And so this total ARPA column for this phase one funding is almost about $1.1 million, which is our first allotment. The remaining balance that we have for this first amount of money, cash on hand, would be about $14,000 or so. So we've kind of captured what we could potentially use that money for. And I'll get into the phase two in a minute here. But then moving on to the CIP restoration reserve money. The reason why this money is available is, as you will recall, we, per the deficit mitigation plan, ended up cutting $1.5 million. This is no small feat. And so we ended up coming up short about $1 million, which then left this $500,000 figure or so, not figure of cash, that actually got transferred over into the capital fund, and it just stayed there. And so now what we're aiming to do is just restore the projects that were put on hold so that then we can stand ourselves back up. I will note that it's not the total 505 that we've got left in reserve, because in FY20, we did have a deficit in the fund of about $70,000. So that's the remaining balance that's available to be spent, or $435,000. So in this bucket that we've identified, there's $125,000 for a sidewalk plow. There's $180,000 for cold in place recycling for the streets. And so this would work towards the 70 PCI pavement condition index goal that we have. And we'd be able to pivot rather nicely into future years so that we could keep investing the same amount of money year over year to make that happen. And that's along with the 505 that's in the traditional capital plan and the other money for fog seal and crack seal. And then we've got $47,000 for snow blower, and then a pickup truck for $34,000. And so this really would set our sort of equipment back up to where we need to be, and sort of put us in a good position. That being said, we still have some ground to cover. This is just kind of sort of the path back, if you will. And then there is $15,000 here for part of the Vector replacement. You saw that in water sewer. That was that portion of this installment. So it just starts to build that back up so we can purchase a new Vector when it's time. We're trying to take an eye towards, installments and doing what we can when we can. And then there is $34,000 in here for dam removal. We'll be looking for grants for this as well. It's a total cost of about $120,000 to do this study. Should clarify, study, not the actual dam removal, because that's a bargain. We should definitely do that if that's the case. So then you can see that comes to $435,000. So that is currently what we have on the list. And then what I do want to show you is the ARPA 2 list, which then has some of the other items that we're proposing to move forward with when we get that money, and we should get that probably in September of next year. And so we'll have that on tap to use. And so if folks are okay with that, I'll move towards that sheet, or I can stay here if there are questions.
Just get a refresher on where we are with the rec center. So yeah, it's just a land purchase and no money is envisioned.
We'll be coming to that.
Okay.
We've got some more charts. Okay. Sorry, Lauren's.
I mean, do you want to wait for infrastructure? I mean, they're on this point, but I don't know if you feel like you're mid presentation. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I mean, I guess. Okay, so just a couple, and really like the frame I'm wondering about is with the federal infrastructure bill and knowing that roads, bridges, dam removal, as some of the specific examples I see we're funding here, like, are we, I guess I just want to make sure that we're like preparing to take full advantage of any opportunities there? Like if we commit to doing it now, might we build, Grout Road Bridge, for example, and then like, oh, if we'd waited a year, we could have had it federally funded or a bigger portion of it. So I guess I'm just like curious what analysis you're using to set the priorities with that, or like if we get it going, are we going to be in a better position to take advantage of that and the timeline will work out great? So just
So I'll take a stab at that. We obviously are aware that this is coming. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know exactly what it's going to fund. So we decided to prepare just with what we need. The good part is this budget doesn't take effect till July 1. So there's a lot of time, there's 7 months in between, 6-7 months to learn more. We can always shift projects out of this to that funding if we're successful in obtaining it. We don't know how much is going to come directly to cities and towns, how much is going to come to the state, how it's going to be dispersed. So there's a lot of money, but how much is directly related? There's a lot of unknowns. So we could conceivably, say half of this got shifted into those monies. We could come back to the council and say, okay, now this money's freed up. Here's the next backlog of projects that's coming. So, that's the beauty of these. You're basically appropriating the dollar sums, and we're showing you what's in them and making sure that the buckets contain what you want them to contain. But until we actually do something, and is there a chance we'll do a project before we could have had it funded? Yes, but I think overall, our goal would be to get as much out of the other funds. And I think actually, you and I had this conversation. We're trying to build in the full 120 for this, the dam removal. And then after our conversation, understanding that there was going to be a lot of dam removal money, we thought, well, maybe this will match a grant to do the study. So we only put the 34 in thinking it. But, in others, we know there's going to be a lot. We don't know how much, I don't know how much the state will keep. Unlike ARPA, I don't think there's a direct appropriation to cities and towns and counties. So
I think that's really helpful. I guess just in that vein, so we don't know some details, but this one's a lot more descriptive than ARPA was in some ways in terms of, it's like there's bridges, it's like it tells you more, there's more guidance, I think, just because it was of the way the bill was enacted. I guess I'm just wondering, like, how much are we knowing that likely we would get some money, or there's certain pots of like the types of projects that are going to be more likely to be funded? Is there any like shifting of priorities that we're doing to front load so that we're ready, like doing engineering, like the dams, I think is a great example. We've been wanting to do that. Like we know there's federal money coming, or is that, I assume that's like part of the calculus, or how much is that being considered?
For the dams, for example, the funds are here is to do the engineering. We don't have any work done on dams so far. So we would need to start with that and figure out what we needed and then seek the funding for removal. Many of our street projects are, various streets of design. Paving is not a particularly heavy design. And whether we move these projects or just, we have no end of those types of projects that we can do. Obviously, East State Street's a big project. If we get more money for that, then we don't have to bond as much money. The same with the wastewater plant and others. Those are, the big ticket items. So, we're definitely planning to pursue whatever we can. But in the meantime, we're planning, not knowing what we'll get.
Thank you. Last one on this, I was just curious, how do we calculate it came up last meeting when we were talking about the difference in trucks and equipment, and when we're looking at electric vehicles compared to fossil fuel vehicles, and often the upfront cost is more, but then the lifetime cost can be lower. I don't know that that's necessarily always true, but I know it's sometimes true. So are we taking that into account when we're budgeting for these, where maybe our upfront cost might be higher, but we're both meeting our net zero goal and long-term saving the community money?
So we did talk to the staff about that after the conversation last week and asked them to start doing that. We don't have any real revised numbers, and then it came up again at the capital projects meeting on Monday. So where we're at now is one of our immediate plan is that one of the water sewer trucks that's on this list will be an electric truck, and we'll we thought that was a good way to test it and get it to see how it works through the winter with the charging and, really give it, because there's the cost and then can it do the job that we need it to do? And we had talk about trying to build in the cost of a high-speed charger because before we invest in the fleet, we need to be able to charge it. And we went so far as to talk about whether that should be, sort of open to the public. And we talked about, well, should, our emergency vehicles have to wait an hour or two for some, so I think the thought was to try to find the funds in here, and we just met Monday, so we haven't tweaked this all yet. But the takeaway from the recommendation from the capital committee is to try to put, I think, $50,000 in here to build build the charging capacity. So knowing that at some point in the future, we're going to be moving to that. So
And I'll be curious, also, actually, just to follow up on that, anything further? Just to follow up on that, I think the estimation of 50,000, I just want to make sure that it's an estimate.
yeah,
And so I assume you all are going to do
we
your
will before we.
research. Okay, great. Okay, cool. Yeah, Jack.
I went through all this on my paper book, and so I have all my things by page on the paper book. But one of the questions I have is right here on the screen now, line 56 on the street lighting conversion. And I wonder if we have, similar to what Lauren's question was, do we have a calculation of the payback time for that conversion for the reduced energy costs?
That's an excellent question. I don't have one handy. I know that there was a lot of work done around this proposal, and so we can certainly get that for sure. And that's one of the benefits to this particular project is that there would be a payback. And so it's a great question. I don't have that answer at the ready though.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about what we've seen so far? I mean, I know we have a question about rec center stuff, and we'll come back to that, but anything further about this? Okay, right, go ahead.
Okay, so just to sort of highlight, based on the bonds that are noted up here, and I'm sure we'll circle back to have a conversation about them, but we've got them sort of lumped into 4 categories here. Sort of infrastructure includes the things that are like the street lighting conversion, Confluence Park, those items. And then we get East State Street, the rec center, and then phase 2 of the wastewater treatment facility. So that's how we've got it currently put together. We can change it in any way that you want, but just for discussion purposes, I just wanted to note that before I stop my share and just bring up the lost revenue.
And just before you do that, I wanted to answer Connor's question. So the proposal here is strictly a land purchase at this point. So that's an estimate of the value of the land. We have informed the landowner that we've put this number in the budget. The committee that's working on it knows that that's where we're going. So there is an appraisal being done, and obviously that could affect. But between this and the reserve in the rec department, we believe we've got sufficient funds to purchase the property. And given the unique sort of opportunity and time, we think there's an advantage to us owning that land, and then we can have, map out where we go from there.
We're not touching the current building now?
No, we'd own it,
Yeah.
but this isn't for that.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. So then just continuing sort of the theme here, I'm going to stop my share and then pull up another sheet and try not to give everybody whiplash with this. So this sheet that I'm pulling up right now is just sort of the ARPA funding phase 2 portion. I can just share my screen here. So this is just a quick kind of proposal to sort of identify what we would do with the other million or so that we're going to be receiving, but we haven't yet. And so this is really looking for a conversation around this, but we've also, heard you and what you've said in previous conversations around ARPA and what you'd like it to go towards. And so this first item is the community survey for about $25,000 or so. This survey would really kind of identify what the community priorities are in a sort of scientific, not sort of, it would be scientific and more robust way, so that then we could really get at, you know, what those items are. I know we've done this survey in the past and it was pretty impressive in terms of really being able to identify areas of vulnerability, words are heard. And, you know, so that's what we'd be aiming to do with this survey, and really trying to identify and capture, you know, what the community is wanting, needing, trying to drive at some of those equity issues as well. And then the next item is community outreach. So it has been brought to our attention that, you know, we really need to focus on transparency and making sure that we can engage the community through leveraging technology. And so this is about $50,000 or so to work with maybe something like what I've got listed here. It's a Granicus product. It's called Bang the Table, kind of catchy. And there's an example of Engage Missoula. And essentially what it is it just provides the platform for you to see what's really going on within the city at any given moment based on projects and things of that nature. And it's pretty neat. It would be really neat for us to have. And I think with the ClearGov budget book that we've put up, there's also a transparency component to that as well. That's not as robust as this, but is at least sort of part of the way there. And so this would maybe bring us a little bit further in that effort, and really trying to leverage technology to get the work of the city out there, and then also to engage the community so we can get needs met. And then this next one is the public restrooms and housing services hub item for $425,000. So a portion of this is a placeholder value for a public restroom facility. We would need to get into the planning on that. So this is preliminary. And then the other sort of portion, whatever that's determined to be, would be for some of those hub support services for vulnerable populations. And so that's based on categorical eligibility within the Arpa funding to help those impacted by COVID and really in need. And then this last piece is an investment in water sewer infrastructure. The two infrastructure pieces that are allowed under ARPA are water sewer and broadband. We did look for those charging stations to see, you know, maybe possibly, but I don't think that would be sort of allowed as part of ARPA. So we would just have to figure out how to fit that in another way, and we can do that. We haven't identified exactly where yet, but we can get into that as well. So this is just a quick list of, you know, what that second pot of ARPA money would look like. And I can go back to the CIP summary sheet if there's more discussion that you want to have around the items on that list. And then I've also got a few other sheets here, but they're mostly just for summary purposes to kind of touch up conversation. I can also bring up any of the budget book materials if you want to go through that. Totally up to you.
Any questions since we want to dig into in this part?
Go ahead, Domit.
Well, I can't read it without my glasses, and I can't put my glasses on without fogging up, so.
Sorry.
So it's my handicap here, but
Oh, no,
the
let me make it
item
bigger.
under the housing and service hub and public bathrooms were separate items, but none of it was, I felt, priced out well as they could be interrelated. So that was one change after the discussion with the CIP on Monday, that the group agreed would be okay to combine them. And that's good to know we have that much resource to apply to this huge problem. And then we can define it as we move along. So I hope you'll feel comfortable with that.
If I
If you
can,
have questions about it.
if I can add on to that, one of the things that I had said in that meeting too was that, because originally we had like $100,000 dedicated to the housing and services hub, and I felt like that needed more clarity or conversation. And you know, if we're going to spend $100,000 on something, I want to be able to say, like, this is what it is. To be fair, an alternative could be maybe we don't know quite what it is, but we have a process that we believe we're going to go through to figure that out. And that, I want to hear from other folks too about like, if, I mean, in this case, silence is like, yeah, this is fine. But at some point, either, probably not tonight, but at a future meeting, if that stays in there, I think we should have a conversation about either what does that look like, or what process do we want to get to a place where we understand what that looks like. I'm seeing a lot of nods, so I'm hoping that that makes sense. But yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Bill, why don't you jump in? Go ahead. Well, I'll just add to that, and I appreciate that thought, but the other thing that's unique about this this piece that we're looking at is it's, 3 months into a fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so there isn't, with all of these things, it's an infusion of capital, but there isn't necessarily an associated plan to manage the human capital needed to implement. And so I think that that's also important. It's like, we can say like, hey, this is great, we can figure it out next September, but it would not be unrealistic for Bill and staff to say like, yeah, but we don't have the capacity from just from our staff to be able to implement these things. So I think that that's another piece of this that, I do love the idea of saying like, hey, we can defer a few of these things, and like, yes, we'd love to, implement a new website that's engages the community and or deals with public restrooms and housing services. But if there's not the staff capacity to be able to implement them, I think that that's part of what we need to be talking about here.
So if I could just weigh in on this, couple thoughts. One is, as far as the actual amount of money, we did have, we had 325,000 in for the bathroom, because that was, I think we had some kind of ballpark price. I can't remember where we got that. And then the 100,000 was really just an estimate. Obviously, I mean, we do need to invest in our water sewer infrastructure as well, but the money could be shifted between there if we felt there needed to be more put into this area. So to Jay's point, presumably part of the planning would be to see if there was an agency we partnered with for these kind of services. And I would say from the staff's perspective, the notion of a housing services hub scored really highly on your priorities, but we weren't 100% clear on what collectively people meant by that. And I know that question did come up in the capital fund. So, to the extent that you all meant the same thing or you had different, it would be good for us to settle on what the vision is, who might partners be, and then what the process might be to move that forward. But we also felt because it scored so highly, we needed to put some significant money in here to allow something to happen, because clearly housing is an important issue in providing services. And yes, maybe it's a new building with a public restrooms in it. I don't know. So I think there's a lot that we could talk about.
Jennifer, go ahead.
So I'm just going to weigh in as I'm going to put my social worker hat on for a second. You all know I've been working with homeless people, communities, families, children for 20 years, and the infrastructure and the staffing is like such a huge piece. And I really hope that when it comes to moving forward with any kind of housing services hub, that the staffing gets centered, because you need to have staff that are going to be compassionate, staying in their positions long term, because a lot of these people are seeing new service providers over and over and over again. It's really exhausting. Yeah, I want to make sure that piece, having a building is important, yes, but also making sure that there's going to be a staff and buy-in from the community long term, because it's a hard thing to get started. You can have the building and you can have all these great ideas, but there's a lot of moving pieces, and I want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
Noted.
Any other thoughts? Oh, Donna, go ahead.
I just wanted to share, I believe it was Cameron who mentioned also, we're getting a study done. We've put out $25,000 for a study that's being done. So that may give us a lot of information of what's needed and suggestions. So we're not trying to act in a vacuum. We're reaching out for more information constantly.
And I'll just say, this is a similar conversation that goes on in the homelessness task force where, everybody sort of has a different idea of what this thing looks like. So the thought with that study is, get all the information to try to put an intelligent proposal on the table. And that there is a lot of conversation about staffing because it's huge, right? If you don't have a partner, it's just a building.
A lot of those agencies are strapped right now as it is, so.
It seems like well, actually, we haven't issued that study yet, right? Like that hasn't gone out. I mean, it might make some sense to, just thinking out loud here, but to wait until we get the results back from that before we assign, yeah, go ahead.
And I think the task force is very receptive to the council helping set the parameters of what that study looks like. I think they'd welcome it, actually.
Oh, okay. Worth conversation. Okay. Good to know. All right, well, further thoughts on this? Yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you for all that. That's really good context. I guess I'm just a little confused. So are we putting out this survey together, community input, but like we've already decided where the money's going? So that's to inform future budgets and getting back to the process of doing community surveys? Like that's not intended to inform the ARPA dollars. It's just a community survey.
It's to probably more inform community needs. One of the nice things about the survey we did in 2000.
Can you turn Bill up? I have a hard time hearing him. Sorry. Thank you.
One of the good things about the survey, we did in 2009 and would like to repeat, is that it gives us a lot of crosstabs on income, race, neighborhood, age, gender, all those sorts of things. So we can see, it gives us a good, as we think about our social justice goals, the chance to see how, in a sort of scientific anonymous survey way, our services split out based on those crosstabs. And then we can better inform not only the investments we make in infrastructure, but our direct services as well, based on that feedback. And those results were really interesting then. Then it'll be interesting to see if they've changed over time.
That's great. I mean, I think doing that again makes a lot of sense. And obviously things have changed a lot since the last time we did this, with the pandemic and everything. So I guess just one thought on this. I mean, I've definitely heard from some constituents asking to have some kind of public process around the ARPA funding that is not replacing what we had already committed to do as a community. So essentially, which is
this batch,
pot, right? So I'm just, curious. I don't know if others have heard that too, but if there's value. I mean, does this need to be tied timeline to the rest of the budget, or is there opportunity to potentially solicit some input? I mean, it could be a really how often are we able to go to the community and be like, we've got $1 million, let's have a fun, what do we want to see out of it together? It could be a good engagement. I know that was one of our goals. I mean, we have to obviously set really clear, you can only do certain things with it, and all of that. You can't just do anything with it. There's
so
the guardrails.
It does not have to be tied to the budget. We don't actually receive the money till September, and then I think we have 2 years to spend it. So there's no rush on it. We wanted to outline this basically because we were trying to address the needs we had on the table and that you had identified as priorities, and given what we had for funding where else, this was, for example, the social services hub in the bathroom, this was an appropriate place to put that. This was a good place to put some of the community engagement piece. And really, we have a huge amount of water and sewer infrastructure, so we just left we sort of balanced it out, so okay, $500,000 in water and sewer. So, we could do that, or we could put $500,000 out, say we're going to spend this $500,000 this way, and we're going to discuss there's any number of ways the council could do it. We just wanted to allow you to see the whole package how they all work together before you proceeded. Or how they could all work together, let's put it that way.
Any other thoughts on this section? Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, we've been talking about the public restroom, so like, I think that needs to be in the budget somewhere. If we are putting it in this line item, does that mean it would not even be able to begin until the second slug of money comes in next fall? So we couldn't even begin construction if it's put here in the budget?
I think we'd want to look at that. I don't know. I mean, I think we could probably borrow for it and pay it back with the ARPA funds. I don't know how.
I think it depends.
Yeah, I think
depends
it's
on-
possible it could start ahead of time. That bill's in law. We've received our first payment. Our confidence is a lot higher that we're going to get the money when scheduled and all that stuff. So I think we could start that earlier. I'd want to be sure, but I think that's right.
I mean, I would rather have the money in hand. That would make me feel a lot more comfortable. But, we do have more assurances now that we'll get the money, you know what I mean? We've already seen the first infusion, and we do have the guidance that we'll be getting it, next fall. And so that's also not that far into fiscal 23, all things considered, a quarter. So it's still, a little bit down the road, but then also, I mean, thinking about developing plans for public facilities, I mean, they will take time and deliberations to sort of get all that off the ground. So, I think we could figure something out.
But I don't think we're tied to waiting till September to actually start constructing if we're ready to go earlier. Or, as Kelly said, we could be ready to go as soon as the money comes in.
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Of this whole list, I really think the public bathroom is probably my number one priority beyond anything else. And I know we can always spend money on water and sewer infrastructure. The rest, and I think I'm interested in seeing it fleshed out more before we're actually writing the check and buying stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. So just to be clear, Jack, that doesn't mean you want to take it out.
No, I'm not saying take it out. And but as you suggested at some upcoming meeting, having more of a discussion about what the housing services hub means, because I don't really know what it means.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm not someone who put one of my dots on that because because I don't really know what it means. But I was just at a meeting last week, mental health meeting, and people mentioned staffing across the state right now in the community mental health centers. There are about 900 vacancies. So staffing is a huge, huge issue.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this section? Okay.
Okay, so the next thing to do from here is I would probably pull up the budget options worksheet so you can kind of see in summary, what the budget generally looks like. And then there are some items that have come in from groups that we might, mention to you so that they're sort of out there on the table. If you were so inclined to add them in, then, we could do that in real time. So let me just see if I can.
So while you're pulling that up, because I think this is a good point or a good place to transition back to a sort of a full discussion, and maybe we can, can you turn the lights back on? Awesome, thank you. Hopefully we can still see this somewhat, or we can turn them back off if we need to, but yeah, so.
What's that?
Can you share that screen?
Oh, is it not sharing? Didn't think so. Well, actually, I wasn't sure, and I was going to wait and see what happened. I was going to try my luck here. Sorry about that. Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we can go around. Now, I did have the thought of, if we do go around, it's possible that, someone might have a lot of questions and we just dig into that and we don't end up getting all the way around. So I guess I would ask if you have a lot of questions, maybe just tell us like the big topics. And we can see if there's some shared concern about things. But I do want to get to all of them. I also just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to share. Just recognizing that we're at like 7:30 right now. So with that in mind, because I'll just say for myself, like I have questions about the budget in general that I want to ask. There are some things that I might suggest. I don't have, I'll just speak for myself. I don't have anything I want to take away, but I also want to, make sure everybody, like I said, has a chance to share. So, yes.
I will start by saying I have nothing
Okay.
to say because this is my first budget, so.
Fair enough. Well, we still want your opinion about all the things, so. Yeah, fair enough, right? Like,
I have nothing to compare it to, so.
well, I think that hopefully also speaks to that, what we've been presented with is at least mostly like reflective of our goals as a council. And that's, I think, a great place to start. It's very encouraging. I'm very grateful for the work that you all have done so far, and along with the staff. So also please pass that along to the rest of the staff for us.
And Kelly, before you start talking about this, if you could blow this up a little bit, that would be helpful to me at least.
So who would like to start? Jennifer, oh, that's true. Jennifer did start. So actually before we get rolling too much further, I do want to point out just a couple of things that I saw from this budget survey that you all filled out. Thank you for doing that. Of this group, 3 of us said that we thought the budget should increase by either COLA or CPI. That's somewhere between 4.4 and 5.9%. And what we are starting with here is in that range. 2 folks said we need to catch up from previous cuts. Therefore, we need a % increase over that. And some folks said, or two folks said, some services should be expanded while others should be cut. It just depends. So just wanted to make sure we have that kind of in mind, because any suggestions that we make, obviously, if we are going to add them, they'll impact the bottom line. I just wanted folks to know sort of where we were at to start with. So, other thoughts? Yes, Jack, go ahead.
I have one very tiny thing. If this isn't the place to do it, tell me. But in the budget book, on page 12, there's a listing of restoring $110,000 for the Housing Task Force. Should be Housing Trust Fund. We've got all these things that have the same initials. We have Housing Task Force, Housing Trust Fund, Homelessness Task Force.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, right.
Thank you for knowing that. I can make that change.
Are there questions or suggestions people have? Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
again, working from my notes from the budget book on page 29 in the revenue summary, we're listing a 56.3% increase in the state payment in lieu of taxes. Is that a temporary COVID add-on? Are we getting it in the future years? Do we know?
Well, actually, last year we had we estimated a significant reduction in that because of COVID, and it didn't happen. We actually got the full amount, so we're back to budgeting what we actually received last year.
Great.
So it's more a return to normal, as opposed, and last year's was a low, an estimated low that didn't turn out to, so it was a windfall for us this past year.
Oh, that's good. So we don't need to be thinking, well, if we spend this money next year, we're gonna have a hangover
We're
next year
anticipating
when it goes
receiving
back.
this amount.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Great. Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. My recollection, economic development, we're setting the $50,000 aside. could spend it on a project. I know there's some creative ideas kicking in the community, but the thought is we'll probably spend it and we'll have a discussion at a later time for the 50K.
So specifically, had two things in mind, although we could reshape that. And we had a lot, so let me just take a little step back. We had a lot of, obviously MDC went away. We didn't have any money in this budget, so it gave us some time to think about it. We talked, should we propose a position? What should we do? And one of the things that Mike Miller, I think, aptly pointed out was that the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was the basis for formation for MDC and sort of laid out our goals and aspirations, is a few years old now. And, one of its key initiatives, was sort of a hotel and parking structure in the center of town. It was one of the things that drove that project. And, and a lot's changed. We've had COVID. So we thought we should have funding in the budget to update that plan to sort of reflect today's reality and today's priorities. And that involves meeting with a lot of stakeholders in the community and getting a sense of where those economic development priorities are. And it was that last plan that recommended creating a nonprofit corporation. And so hopefully this plan would recommend some way of moving forward, be it staffing or whatever. We think that might be about 25,000. The remaining 25,000 is, I would like us to keep that, because what that really means is that then we will be doing I will be mostly doing it, but with Cameron's help and our staff's help. And there are times when I need technical assistance like White and Burke, or people particularly for using TIF, but even other development consultants. So the idea would be that would be for us to tap into on an as needed basis as opportunities come up. Like, as we're working with Sabin's Pasture Development, I've been using them, and they're not free. So
I would just say, like, I know, like Dan Jones, for example, he's met with like 80 people in town and kind of had this concept of a economic roundtable, and not totally dissimilar than the first one, I think. So, I would like to give him a day in court to actually like pitch this, and if it's a good idea, maybe go with some of the ideas there. I don't know if it's the full kit and caboodle, but I just like to, personally, I would like to have that in the mix for future conversation. And I don't know if that's part of the money or if I should propose a bit more on top of that. So.
I don't know what the idea is, so I don't know how much money it is.
$500,000.
We can pass you his emails.
Go ahead, Donna.
Likewise, I was thinking that maybe part of that money would be applied to whatever we want to do with, I'm going to call it the Elks Club plan, that we actually look at it in a more holistic way than just our little presentation we had from the hub group.
Do you mean like for other uses, or?
Well, I mean, no, it's using this 50,000 economic development. Again, you might pull in expertise from people, but that could be part of our economic development plan, is including that land purchase and what we do with it and how we incorporate partners and a regional mindset.
So sorry, I have more questions. Are you thinking of like economic development, because we've had this long conversation previously about outdoor recreation as being economic development? Is that sort of where you're
Yes.
going with that thought? Okay.
Yes,
Got
yes.
you. Okay.
As well as more rec services.
Right.
So I think from our perspective, pursuing the purchase of the land was to try to further that goal of more rec services and the outdoor recreation as economic development. I mean, we will at some point need planning money, and depending on the cost of the land, there is some money, as I said, rec has some set aside for planning for facilities. And obviously if we build things there, we're gonna have to come back and get money for that. So, I mean, honestly, this really wasn't intended to be used for planning for recs and park. This was really meant to be sort of for business expansion and to update our economic, and maybe we'll learn as part of that plan that that's important, and then to assist us on actual economic development projects where we need professional help. So I would not have envisioned this to be used for sort of rec and parks planning.
Yeah, I understand it's undefined. I guess I just want to slip that idea in there. Yeah. And I feel like it's really great being part of the CIP, and anytime you should join that discussion just to hear all this information more than once. And I really appreciate how much the staff has responded to the input we've given them, including that $425,000, the housing service hub. and restrooms. I have one thing that I think you might want to consider adding, because the Central Vermont Public Safety Authority Board voted to potentially put $30,000 on the Barry Montpelier ballot. For Montpelier, that would be a share of 14,100 max share. The budget for the Public Safety Authority, this one is going through lots of changes. We have a meeting this coming Monday. We have our final one, hopefully it will be the January 13th, but I'll keep you posted, but I'll just give you a heads up on that. Otherwise, I like where we're at and may make some changes, but I feel it's a good first pass through.
So just so I'm clear, so you all voted to do this, right? So I guess what I'm saying is because we don't have a say in that, right? Like
No,
that's
it's like the library.
right. It's coming. Okay. So, and I'm just trying to think of, like, historically, have we included that in our estimation of what our budget is? I feel like
Yes.
We haven't, other than we've included it because it is part of the total. I mean,
Right,
to
okay.
the extent that we want to know what taxpayers are facing,
Yeah.
we've certainly included it as our planning. We, like with the library and others, we've said, here's what the city's proposing, here's what others are proposing.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still part of the bottom line.
Got you. Okay.
And the funds he put in the budget were the FY20, the 23.5.
Oh, because it's already listed in there. Oh, right, I see. Because, right, CVPSA ballot is listed as 23.5, so we could put it in as 100 because we know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where it's
Just
at.
for a point of clarity, that's like a carryover from a prior year, so it's not actually in the budget for this year. You can see that.
It was dashed, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I just
there.
was trying to explain where the prior year
Yeah,
number
Per-
came from.
perfect. So
But we didn't get it the last year either.
Right.
It's been 2 years.
Okay. Thank you. It's good to know that we can fill that in. I have other thoughts, but yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks. Couple thoughts. I mean, overall, I also think this is a really good budget. I think it was really responsive to the strategic plan. I am really excited to see fully staffed departments and that, getting back to the types of quality of service that, the community needs and expects and all of that. A couple thoughts. One, there was a request that was in everyone's inbox today from the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee to consider a line item for stipends for service on city committees. This is a big equity issue, who can actually participate, and because we are so reliant on volunteers to do so much amazing work for our community, it's a line item. The request was for 42,000. There is an expectation that probably that full amount would not be spent. You want to be able to make it available to everyone, but from experience with other committees, not everybody takes it just because it's available. So I think, obviously we would need to budget the full amount, and but there would be an expectation. So that was one of the things in our equity assessment from Creative Discourse that was a recommendation. So I wanted to put that out there for consideration. Another was from Kate Stevenson from the Energy Advisory Committee had urged us to consider funding an energy and sustainability position. There's been some great experience in other communities like Hartford, Vermont, where they hired an energy coordinator, and that person was able to make up their salary in 7 months on the job by identifying efficiencies that they were able to secure. I think even just watching, knowing we've got our net zero plan to implement, things like district heat, where we've seen both challenges and opportunities, where if somebody was able to focus on it more fully and try to bring more customers on, and there were efficiency projects identified that people were able to install, addressing some of the concerns. And I think if somebody was more proactively seeking out those kinds of opportunities, and just knowing we've got the climate action plan the state just adopted, a huge slew of state programs coming online, you know, state ARPA dollars, state infrastructure dollars for like EV charging stations. There's 21 million for Vermont for that. Like being able to make sure that we're taking full advantage. I think like it's a time where we would be able to reap rewards from having someone focused on this for the community. So I wanted to put that on the table. One other, this is more of a question. So the peer outreach workers that the police review committee had recommended, so the budget reflects more social worker FTEs, but not.
So there was a
peer
total of
outreach.
1.5 for peer and social, and we've increased 1.5 for the social worker portion. So there's another 1.0, I guess, half for social worker and 0.5 for peer that is not yet funded. The peer social worker, that's essentially what at least what we currently have is what's funded with the homelessness task force. We're paying for that service. So. And that was really just trying to stay within, you know, trying to expand some, get all the positions back and stay within our line.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, we had identified it in that committee as a priority, and, you know, to the conversation earlier about staffing and addressing these issues. You know, I think just,
So I
looking
would-
at that,
And we did, you know, just to be clear, we also did include the body worn cameras, and most of, virtually all of the recommendations are funded within the department operating budget. That's the one thing that we thought, well, maybe we can get that one next year, that piece. So it wasn't that we ignored the committee, it was just that was.
Appreciate appreciate that.
Sorry, can I follow up on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're assuming, I guess, the legislature is probably not going to fund a half position again for the social worker. We don't know, so. Nothing like that.
So our budget, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but our budget assumed that so right now, we split a half position with Barry, and we pay a third, the state pays a third, and Barry pays a third. So we assumed that would stay in place, and that we would then fund a full other half of another position, whether it was the same person or not, with no state funding.
Okay, thanks.
I also have a follow-up question on that. Sorry, if that's okay. And actually, this is a question for Chief Pete, who I see is on. I just wanted to check in about the shared social worker. You know, I see it posted in the weekly notes every week that this person is available, and I am just curious. I mean, I hope that residents, folks in Montpelier are accessing this person, but I just wanted to confirm, you know, before, I do know it was a part of the recommendation of the Police Review Committee, but I just wanted to confirm that, you know, this person is being well used by Montpelier residents.
Yes, ma'am. The shorter answer to that one is a definite yes. I can, in continuing on with that, Susan is,
I think so too.
there's a lot of overlap.
Oh, okay.
between-
Oh,
I'm sorry, ma'am. There's a lot of overlap between the folks that are in need of service.
hold on
in
a second.
Barry.
We're hopefully going to be able to hear you soon.
Actually, I'm trying to get into the Zoom. Oh, the mouse is not connected. That's why I said.
The simplest volume on the speaker.
Maybe.
Chief, can you try saying a couple things?
Yes, ma'am. Are you able to hear me?
Okay, we still can't hear you.
Yeah, I need to get into the.
Can we hear
Zoom
anybody
meeting a
else?
little-
Is it just Brian or?
I don't know.
Hear him coming out over there.
I think I have to.
Yeah, I feel like I hear him
Yeah,
coming
I
out
think
of.
it's not the share.
We can hear him fine. Can I ask a question?
Sure, go
related
ahead.
to When Lauren mentioned the energy position, I thought we approved one that just hadn't been filled because we reduced our budget.
We had approved one a couple of years ago and filled it, we didn't fill it as that. We used the funds differently and attempted to get at the situation differently. And it's been with mixed success.
So it's not considered an unfilled position, it's
No.
just gone.
No, it was,
So we have to reinstate it?
we'd have to put funding in for it.
Okay.
How are we doing? Still working on it? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, oh, we can hear you. That's wonderful. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
right on. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, City Manager Frazier, City Manager Niedermeyer. The short answer to that question is a definite yes. Susan has been extraordinarily, she's been a foundation and a rock into what we're trying to do regarding 21st century policing and service to the community and bridging that access to resources within the Washington County area with folks who are in most need of them. So yes, Susan has been a phenomenal part of that, phenomenal partner with Washington County Mental Health Services. In addition to that, even though Susan is sharing her time between Montpelier and Barry, a lot of the folks who are in need of these services often do visit both twin cities. So it's just been nothing but great cooperation. So the answer to that question is a definite yes, ma'am.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, sorry, and I think I had interrupted you, Lauren, on, if you have more, I want to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I think gets more to the capital discussion we were having, just thinking about how our budget can be responsive to opportunities that might come up as we learn about like state dollars or federal dollars that are flowing to the state. Like, for example, there's a line item about PFAS contamination at wastewater treatment facilities. Like, if we realize we could put filtration in and we could get that federally funded, I don't know what we need in our budget now to make sure that we could be responsive to opportunities. So I don't know if there's a portion, either if it's that 500,000 of the ARPA funds or, something that would give us matching ability, for example. I know there's a bill that's going in this year about municipal energy efficiency projects and how they want to make a really generous state match to help cities do a lot of efficiency projects, for example. So if that moves and becomes available for the next fiscal year, just would, welcome any thinking on how to actually structure that. But I would love to be ready to take as much advantage of those kinds of things that I think could be online by the fiscal year budget that we're talking about.
So the short answer to that is really any of those funds that we've identified could be reallocated. If we had, if we reprioritized an opportunity at any time, we could say, hey, we're not going to, buy this truck or pave this road or do whatever. I mean, we'd have to have a conversation about what that means, but we could, we might, if we're going to leverage a higher priority project like PFAS or something, then I would say, sure, let's reallocate. And I mean, again, the council really appropriates the money and the general purposes. The voters just allocate the money, and then we manage it over the course of the year in conjunction with you. So we can, I think we can be as responsive as we need to be.
Great. Now go ahead, Donna.
Lauren, I just recently, I get some emails from the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission when they know a grant's coming up. You seem to be in that groove. Do you notify PDW? Hey, I heard about this. Is she a conduit for us? Because the staff is good on jumping on opportunity when they know. So maybe you could be our point person.
New job.
Yeah, I mean, really, you're just great. You're in the know.
Well, she does, and VLCT does, and CVRPC does, and our own staff tracks these things as well. So, but yeah, Lauren has always been very helpful at pointing these out.
I just want to point out, I know Vicky has had her hand up, and I just want to acknowledge that this is a workshop time. So Vicky, I just wanted to let you know that we're prioritizing the council discussion at this point, and we'll have a public hearing on this at, I think it's our next meeting. It's either, actually,
Public hearings aren't until
they're in
January.
January, okay. But anyways, we're going to prioritize our discussion for now, but well, we'll check in again at the end if you're still here. Anyway, just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. I'm sorry. And all right, so other, yes, go ahead, Connor.
Perennial proposal from me, but I think we have a good legislative agenda. I think there's a ton of opportunities to draw down federal money. I think there's a bunch of things to track, whether it be rivers or PFAS or public restrooms and institutions, public safety stuff with like the social worker. I really think $15,000 would be well spent contracting with a lobbying firm in town here who would have a point person. These firms have someone sitting in the appropriations committee, institution committees, monitoring the appropriations bills, the capital bills, any opportunities for grants that come down that we just miss. We don't know what we need because we just don't know. So I think $15,000 would pay for itself. I'd even be willing to take $2,000 from the legislative welcome reception for it, but I think we have enough cooking up at the Dome and enough potential for federal funds being drawn down. There could be some huge potential there. We just can't cover it. We don't have the staff. We're volunteers. I'd like to propose
Yeah.
$15,000 for a lobbyist.
Yeah. So in my mind right now, we're just sort of collecting all the ideas, and then we can
Sure.
sort of hash them out further. Is that okay?
Oh,
Okay, okay. Yeah, other thoughts, Jack?
Are you interested in just sort of high-level thoughts of the budget as
Yeah.
a whole at this point? Because that's fine. I agree with I guess Lauren and Donna that I'm not ready right now to say yes, I vote to put this out to the voters the way it is. But I think it's very encouraging that we look like we can propose a very responsible budget with that addresses most of the really important things that we've been talking about doing. And looking at some of the big items we have on here, I'm very pleased that we're finally going to get to fixing the elevator at City Hall, which is has been a looming problem and threat for a long time. The Main-Barry intersection, again, is something that we've needed to do for years. Putting a really healthy amount of money into road maintenance and improvement, because that is, I think, for all of us, it's probably the number one complaint we hear from constituents. So I think there's a lot of really good things here. There are some things about the future that I either think about or worry about that I think I'd like to see if we can explore a little bit. One of them is where the state is on bringing workers back, because that's going to have a tremendous impact on the parking fund and on the rooms and meals tax. Although I have noticed that lately, as I'm driving through downtown, most of the parking spaces are full. It's obvious that there are more people working or coming downtown and parking than there were back when we thought things were really bad, when they were actually not nearly as bad as they are now. But so that's a real question for the city for the future. Another thing that is more of a worry than anything else is the upcoming reappraisal, and And the biggest question to me, and I know, having been on the Board of Civil Authority and Board of Abatement for many, many years, I know how it all works, and that people are always afraid that if their appraisal goes up, assessment goes up, that means their taxes are going to go up, and that's not necessarily true. But I think the pattern has also been for some time that each time we do townwide reassessment, there's a shift from in the tax burden from the commercial to the residential sector. And so that's something that is going to have an impact on residents. And so as we think about what the burden is on our taxpayers, that's something to always keep in mind. There are a couple of tiny things that one is a big thumbs up, and the other is a question. The big yes is, it's great to see money in the budget this year for the Independence Day celebration. Obviously, that's going to depend on how things go next year, but I think people will be very, very happy if we can have a parade and have the celebration on the State House lawn next year. Another even tinier thing, but it was last year or 2 years ago, this got a much bigger and more heated debate than we might have expected, and that's the line 34, the $1,000 for the USS Montpelier. And when the last time we had this debate where some people were saying, take it out because it saves us $1,000, and other people really wanted to keep it in. It's only $1,000 in a very big budget, but it is one of those things that to me embodies kind of a cultural divide in the city. And so I think if someone knows something about how that happened, I think it's worth having that discussion, because it's likely to come up and be a discussion again. Oh, and I had one other thing, Chief Pete, if you're still here. On page 122 of the book, or the appropriation for, or 126, the appropriation for body cameras, which I strongly support. Am I right in thinking that there's no personnel cost associated with that? Or we planning on having to hire anyone, or you're just absorbing that?
I'm sorry, sir. Which my sound is going in and out. Which line item is that one, sir?
The body cams. Is it going to cost us? Are we going to be paying someone to be reviewing the video, responding to public records requests, and is that going to be a cost that we're not seeing reflected in the proposed budget?
We did take that into account, sir, and I think what we'd like to do is we're still trying to draw numbers and making sure that we collect accurate numbers regarding public records requests. And so I think for right now, and then based on what the software platform can do regarding redactions, I think right now it'd be more prudent to take a wait and see approach before we could come close to entertaining hiring an administrative person to help us in dealing with those types of public records requests. They will significantly, I'm anticipating they will add to the public records requests we already get, but I don't know how much at this point.
Thanks. Also, Chief, big thumbs up on chipping away at the vacancies in your department. I think it's great that that we're getting those down, hiring people to replace fill the vacancies that we had.
Thank you, sir. It's all the officers. They're going out there and looking for folks that they'd like to work.
That's great. Anything else, Jack?
That is it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I may share some of my thoughts. I realize we talked about this already, but just in terms of potential charging station and electric truck that we had talked about at the capital improvements committee, that is now, the thought is that that will be in the water budget. Is that correct?
The truck will definitely be there.
Truck
So we already have the
Okay.
trucks in the water and sewer
Right,
budget, so
right.
we'll just adjust the price of one
Okay.
of those, or maybe just wait and see what.
And the charging station.
The charging
is-
station, we
is-
got to figure out where to put it. but-
Okay.
So that will either be an add or a shift.
Right.
Probably not an add. it'll
And
be
just to
shift
be
somehow.
clear, we vote on the water budget at a different time.
Correct.
So,
the charging station may not be in the water budget because it will probably would be used by not just that truck.
right,
So
yeah, that would make
we'd have
sense.
to sort of figure that out.
Yep, okay. Great. So Lauren, thank you for bringing up the stipends for other city committees. That's something that I'm interested in. And also the energy coordinator position. I think we need to see like, well, so how much would that cost? And I think there's some really interesting potential there. And at least in terms of the stipends for city appointees, going slightly back a topic, the proposal that we got from the Social and Economic Justice Committee was recommending a process where people could apply, so everyone wouldn't necessarily just get funding, but people could apply for $50. And I asked where that had come from, and that was the recommendation from Creative Discourse, that was the amount to start with, because I was curious where that amount came from. And that I think is fine, particularly that it came from Creative Discourse. If there's some kind of application process, I think we probably would need to flesh that out. What does that look like?
What would be the basis for somebody getting it or not getting it?
I don't know. Yes, go ahead.
So the way we've talked about it is basically the reason the line item is what it is because if we're going to make it available, it should be available to everyone.
Yep.
But then it would be essentially an opt-in thing. So not everybody would opt in and take it. What we're hoping to do is the city of Essex in Vermont is implementing this starting in January. So by the time this would come online here, we're hoping to look at the program they've built and take lessons learned and have, the details of like, how do we make this work? Because, there's considerations of like, you want to make it not feel like something people don't want to take, or, you want it truly to be accessible. And so just the way you structure how it's provided and how people are made aware of it, and is it working, and look at the amount that they offer and stuff. So I think we could refine the implementation plan over the coming months. But this was like the baseline of, getting the amount in the budget so that we could then figure out the structure of how exactly to offer it in a way that is going to, make these committees more accessible.
And they had suggested to start this as a pilot with a handful of committees. And I would be open to talking about, if we do go forward with this, are those the right committees? I would have prioritized providing stipends to committees that the city has to have. For example, the DRB and the Planning Commission. I know the Planning Commission was already on their list, but the DRB wasn't. But we have to have those groups. So that's where I would start, and then go out from there. Potentially also the Design Review Committee. These sort of ones that are where we sort of are expected to have them, and we don't really have flexibility as to like the number of seats that that are on these boards. Anyway, we can have further conversation about that. And I think that is it for me for now. So a lot of repeats there. Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
I guess I would hope the stipend would really help someone pay for a babysitter. And if they're only getting $50, so is it not equitable just to say there has to be an express need? Otherwise, to me, $50 won't allow a parent with young kids to come. It's almost not useful.
Yeah.
So help me understand why it has to be available, not on need, but to everybody. I don't see how we can afford it and help people meet the real need to pay their sitter so they can come.
So just to make sure I'm understanding the question right, like potentially we could make a larger amount available to fewer people to make sure that you're actually making it, like if someone had to hire a babysitter and it cost more than $50, for example, I guess I just want to make sure I
You don't
understand your
get much
question.
babysitting for $50.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, this will be based on need in that people will say, like, essentially sign up for it, saying, yes, this is something that I plan to take advantage of, so that it allows me to serve on the committee. And what we've seen in the examples that were brought to the Social and Economic Justice Committee are, there's state committees are starting to do this more, where they're giving some more generous stipends, and like the Climate Council just offered similar stipends, and very few people actually ended up taking them, but it was available, and it did allow some people to participate that would have found it a burden otherwise. So, because this is kind of a standard amount is what we found. I think by doing it as a pilot, the idea was we could learn some of this. Is it actually bringing in new people that are able to participate? Is it the right amount? Is it being offered in a way that people can take advantage of it? Is it, are people who have served for years taking it, that it seems like, is this changing the, who's able to participate? So I think that's the kind of lessons that we would hope to learn. But this is pretty standard from the research we did in terms of amount and the kind of approach and structure. And I don't know if
And I think to be
Cameron or
clear,
others have more to add.
it's $50 per meeting.
Yeah.
It's not just $50 flat to be on the committee. It's $50 per meeting.
Okay.
So you could probably get a babysitter for one meeting for $50.
Yes.
And then every,
Yeah, I'm not finding the auditory working very well
sorry,
for me.
it's
Yeah,
$50
but I
per
got that.
meeting.
Thank you.
That's what I just
guess
read it.
I get when I feel like what we get, and maybe we have to do that and say, do I really need this? But I'm really wanting to focus what little funds we have to get that diversity we're not getting because of financial difficulties, and not necessarily everybody getting it. So that's where I'm at, and maybe that's not legal. I don't know. That's what I was trying to ask you. That would be my preference, is that it really goes where it's needed to get our diversity that we need.
So this is clearly a policy question, and however you want to handle this is fine. I guess I would say from an administrative perspective, if we get into means testing and need-based, then someone has to make a determination of that.
Yeah.
And that means someone has to review. So we don't have the ability to do that, nor would I want to get into having people have to submit their financial standing to us. I think it would just have to be, I think it would work most efficiently if you just, put it out there and people could choose to take it or not. And you're right, some people who don't need it might take it, but that's the way it goes.
Jack, go ahead.
I would be surprised if these are the boards that we use or something like that. I would be surprised if we spend half of this money, which is not an argument for not doing it necessarily, but I suspect that most people, for instance, we don't have 15 people on the housing task force. Not sure how many we do have, but I think that most people would not take the money, and I wouldn't want to put someone who needs the money in the position of having to justify it.
I understand.
So that's my thinking.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Connor.
Are we waiting? Like in
Sure,
particular?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I don't know what form it looks like. I don't know how much money, but pretty much the Social Justice Committee, we hired this consultant, they came in, they gave us all this data. And it looks like this is like the only thing they're asking for, and it's substantial, of course, but I think, you know, if we do these things, like have a report come out, it's got to be more than just sort of admiring it for a couple hours. We got to follow through with some action steps, whether it's a lean year or not, because, you know, social and economic justice, I think goes beyond that. So I would I think we have a week to like maybe flesh it out, kick some ideas around, what committees are relevant, how much money is it? But I'd love to see it in some form.
Cool. All right, other thoughts? Yeah, Jay.
General budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
not just-
great.
okay.
Perfect.
Well, I just want to say that I certainly appreciate everybody's thoughts. I've had lots of notes and I was happy to cross most of them off because you folks have covered them and I appreciate that. But just there's two things that I want to come back to, and it's just more about thinking about how we approach this, not necessarily making a specific proposal. But first, I think it's really important that we acknowledge the opportunity and responsibility around the potential of asking for a $1.5 million bond item to purchase the golf course land. One, I think it's incredible opportunity. We live in a river valley. There is not much open space. Certainly very, very little flat space. Not that that's totally flat, but it's like kind of getting there, right? But it's manageable. It's space that could be used for a lot of different purposes. So I think the opportunity to be able to buy that property is, the timing is, dare I say, generational. It just doesn't come up very often. And I think that that's something that we should really take seriously and you know, engage with the community about how important this how unique this opportunity is. At the same time, I also want to acknowledge that owning that land comes with it like a really big responsibility in terms of how it could potentially be developed or not. And there are lots of organizations and folks that would love to take advantage of what we could do there, whether it's the folks from the hub, whether it's, you know, outdoor groups, it's tennis players, soccer players, I mean, you know, cross-country skiers, I go on and on and on and on. So I think that acknowledging that if we're to move forward with that, then I think we need to be diligent and smart about and at least allocating resources to develop a plan to make it so that it could benefit the community as best as possible. I don't want to be in a situation where if we bond and buy the land, then it's just sort of like, well, whoever shows up can just do with it that they want. I don't think that would be fair. But at the same time, it really is an incredible opportunity. And then the other piece, and this ties back a little bit to what Donna was talking about, is around economic development. And again, I don't necessarily have a specific proposal here, but I do think that we need to invest some money to update the plan that was done a few years ago. A lot has changed. The world is very different based on what the recommendations they gave us were. And I think that if we were to try to implement those recommendations now, they wouldn't get very far for a lot of reasons. And so I think investing in that does make a lot of sense. But at the same time, I'm worried that I just want to acknowledge that I think it would, you know, if there was money available, like Bill, like you said, that like, hey, yeah, I could do, you know, if something comes to me, then I could, you know, be able to hire White and Burke or a consultant or somebody to help see it through. I think that's all well and good, but at the same time, I feel like there's an opportunity that's not a proactive stance. That's very much a passive stance. And Lord knows you have enough to do. Cameron, the staff, everybody has enough to do. So I wonder if we should give some more thought to could the city be in a position where we could take a more proactive stance around economic development financially, or what that would look like and what sort of investment that would take. Like I said, I don't necessarily have a specific proposal right now, but I do think that it would behoove us. And I think that this, you know, this is where you get into a lot of, you know, gray area, but talking about outdoor recreation and recreational opportunities and Parks Department and our Recs Department and the property, that we could potentially bond for. And then also looking at the other side of that, looking at downtown and being proactive around economic development. I think that, we're in a place where that could be, the return on investment could be significant if we were to take a more proactive stance on that. So.
Well, I mean, that's where I'd like us to be, especially if they could do energy work.
We've already tried to combine that with something else.
Can't combine it all.
Can't combine, don't combine.
I think we would be more at the 100,000 that we were at before. When you start talking about a staff person, benefits, some operating funds, I think that's really where we'd be. And that's where we started with the budget, was to try to put that in. And, as we tried to weigh the various priorities and get everything in and stay where we ended up with the level, some things just didn't make it. And that was when we said, well, let's do this. That keeps us moving forward, but it doesn't, we didn't want to zero it either. But I think regardless of how it looks, I think we're going to be at that $100,000 level to really do it right. And I'd be happy to do it faster.
Well, and that's something that we could talk about, increasing that amount potentially. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off if there's more.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, well, Jack, before you go, I just want to acknowledge that it is just about 8:30.
That was the first thing I was going to say.
Oh, really? Yeah, all right, on it. It seems like most folks have had an opportunity to at least weigh in initially, which is great. I do want to take a break, and then I think we'll sort of pick up the conversation from here and see where we want to go with it. And maybe we can get back to, well, actually, let's talk about it after, where we go after this. So, but for now, let's take a 10-minute break. We're going to reconvene at 8:40. Whatever your 8:40, and we are going to reconvene here. Jack, you were going to kick us off. If you're ready.
I am ready, thank you. And I'm actually following up on what Jay was just talking about, because as we haven't really talked much about the bonding thing yet, and I think that's probably a bigger discussion. But I would have to say that of all the proposals for bonding, the land acquisition for the recreation center is probably the one that gives me the most pause. And part of it is that we don't really have a fully developed plan for the new recreation center itself, if that's what we're going to do. And part of it is because I would like to think through some more the degree to which the success of our placing the recreation center on that location is dependent on the success of the private development of the hub that we had a presentation on. And I don't really know whether, what their financials look like and whether they're whether the business is going to make it or not. But and I certainly hope that it does. My one of the things that was in my head is, after we had that presentation, and as I was going home, was that I wish that some of the people making that presentation were younger than me, so that we can have really think more that this is the thing that is going to attract people that are younger than me and is going to be going, not just as long as people my age are still able to go out and play tennis, but is going to be used and useful by younger families, by people who I suspect are mostly not using that kind of facility. Just thinking of the young families I know in town, people in their 30s, 40s, I think they're mostly not going to facilities like that, although this is not a scientific study at all. But that's something that kind of worries me about going down that road. And I think I would want to be more confident before we do that.
Go ahead, Connor.
Can I just ask you, does it hinge on the hub being successful?
That's my question.
Yeah, because I look at the alternatives, right? I don't think you can polish that building on Berry Street up enough to ever make it viable. And I'd rather put housing there, frankly, the more I think about it. And it doesn't seem like there's enough space down at the rec fields there. So even if it was standalone, I think I'd be inclined to go in that direction, if for nothing else, and lack of other options.
And Jack,
Yeah, go ahead.
just to follow up, I totally appreciate your point, and if I wasn't as clear as I could have been, I apologize, but I'm with you 100%. That being that, how we utilize that space and that land is crucial, and what would the plan be, and that we would have to go into it not saying, oh, we're doing this so that the hub or X or Y organization is just going to decide what to do with it. But I do feel like the opportunity for the city to take ownership of that land, if this is a time to happen, is not one that we should take lightly, and not one that we would, even if it takes us, not that one that we would want to let pass. And even if it takes us a couple of years to figure out a plan and do a significant community outreach and find a partner or partners in the community to help develop it as best we could, it would, the opportunity to be able to control the fate of that land, I think is significant and unique in its timeliness.
Donna and then Lauren.
And I would just add to that, it's a great question, Jack. I prefer we own the land and that we also don't exclude housing. We could do a really good collective housing there that's multi-units, really smartly done. And I just give kudos to Steve Rubiani, who really is willing to think about having the city own it. I mean, he's really such a civic-minded person. It's an opportunity I would hate for us to miss. And then if we're in charge, fine, we can reach out to Hub Group and lots of groups to make lots of things work out there. And that would be part of the study and looking at it.
Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing about how tied in, so thanks for raising that question and appreciate the responses. One of my constituents had what I thought was a great idea of creating a youth advisory committee to work with the city to help inform and think about what the opportunities. So I'll be connecting her with Cameron probably. She's very plugged into the parents group and stuff, so I think could, but I thought that idea of getting some different perspectives and, being able to have this as an opportunity, take advantage of this moment of the land being available seems to make a lot of sense to me, and then look at what our options are and work with the community on, what is going to be a resource for people for years to come.
Yeah, great. But just to circle back, particularly to the bonds in general, like one possibility is that we move forward with the bonds sort of as proposed. We could also reshuffle them. We could also say we want to pull this one off of the list for now. And I know we'll actually officially vote on this later, but where I'm thinking about going, just so you know, is I would love to, let's just talk about the bonds. Are we okay with them? Do we want to redo any of them? And then I would like to come back to the budget in general. And a number of folks proposed, I heard 4 different things. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there are 5. And I'd like to just get like a straw poll, like, are people interested in pursuing the things that were talked about? So that should give us an idea of sort of where we're landing, and we'll see whether that is palatable to us in terms of what that implies for the increase or the percentage or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm anticipating this conversation going, if that's okay here, team. But coming back to just the bonds in general, I want to come back to you, Jack. Are you proposing that we pull that one off of the list? Or you don't, you also don't have to have a definitive answer to that.
Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer
Okay.
yet. I think it's an important question to raise,
Okay.
but I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it at this
Okay.
point.
Okay. Any other proposed changes we have to the bonds? I'm seeing some no's here, maybe. Okay. If you do, keep us posted. Otherwise, sounds like we'll move forward with, at least the consensus anyway, sounds like we're moving forward with the bonds as proposed. Yes.
I would appreciate it maybe if Kelly could put together a slide similar to the one we saw where the grouping of the bond is like in its own little spreadsheet
Yes.
figure, so we can read it and see. We can group the bonds like this, maybe 2 or 3 alternatives of grouping the bonds. That's, big print. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm picturing, because there's really 4 column.
Yeah.
Was there 4 bonds? There's 4 bonds. So, what's in each of those bonds? Maybe just by column. Does that make sense? Is that
they're
kind of
all-
what you're picturing?
So to make it fairly easy, so one is the State Street bond.
Mhm.
So that's the State Street, and that's water, sewer, storm drains, sidewalks, paving, all of that. That's 7.2 million.
Mhm.
One is the wastewater plant, which you heard about last week, and that's really a self-contained project. One is the purchase of the Elks Club land. So those three are pretty straightforward. It's the last one, the infrastructure, so that includes the Berry Street intersection, that includes the street lighting, that includes Confluence Park, that includes the Marvin Street storm retaining wall. What else is in that?
The Grout Bridge.
No, the Grout Bridge is not.
Oh, that's not.
DPW heating, which is part of net zero.
Yep.
I have it
Right, the
from
DPW
Oh,
heat-
sorry.
pellet
Yeah,
heating.
okay. Sorry.
Marvin
Thank you.
Street and then Confluence.
Right.
It totals about 1.815.
Right.
Okay, so we have it. Yeah.
From the other night.
There you go.
From the
Yeah.
other day.
So that's the only one that's got a lot in it. The rest are single items.
I understand, but I also think not only, because you had some different presentations in your chart when you did.
So I had split out initially the Confluence Park from that. So there were
Yeah.
5 items, and the committee said group those together. And I think the only other consideration was whether to lump East State Street in with the wastewater plant. And
I was just talking about one, you had like a screen presentation instead of a spreadsheet on those key bond groupings.
Yep.
And maybe I wasn't needing to see what all the individual items was, but just like a brief naming for not only a clear picture, but also for the public. I think it's great to have this detail, but if you see a slide screen that says, this bond is the wastewater treatment, this one is
Right.
the land, this one is the infrastructure, and then you have this for backup, I just think it helps people to orientate themselves.
Oh, yeah, and certainly we would want to do that. I can't share my screen on this, can I?
So,
I can.
We also have the,
I give you all permission.
And you did the same
TIF
thing at
for
the
the garage, too.
CIP. You did a screenshot
Yeah, that's what
saying,
I'm
this
trying
is
to
the
do right now.
ARPA restored, this is the ARPA, whatever it was, the next phase, and that wasn't as clear here. Just somehow supplement the spreadsheet with
can't
those
have-
really clear
You
screen
can't have 2 share screens
narratives
going
is
on at
very
once,
helpful.
right?
I want to share yours.
Yep, I'm not currently. This actually is
Oh.
just up there, stuck, because I was disabled
Alright.
for a minute there.
Okay, I'm trying.
It'll probably only show up in the Zoom, right?
So Kelly's
I'm sorry,
screen
this is not hooked up, I'm sorry.
is just, you just in a minimized view, so
Yeah.
you're not shared.
Great, yep.
When I hit share, oh, I have to.
You actually have to share your screen.
Gotcha.
Aha.
So this is what you're talking about, Donna. So this was the slide I showed last week. And since then, we've put the Confluence Park in with the infrastructure projects. So there's one less.
Yes.
but Don, I appreciate your point of like consolidating, have it being very clear, like this is what each dollar amount is. And, you know, one thing
Oh, yeah. No,
that we didn't
absolutely.
mention was also the TIF piece for the garage that's on there as well. So
Well, but that's not, yeah.
I guess we're not.
That one's not, we're not voting
Yeah.
on. I mean, that's not going on the ballot. That's already passed. That's just a new debt that's going into, that we're paying in our budget, so. But I think, so, yeah, we can recreate this summary very easily.
But I hear you too, Donna, about is there were other columns like ARPA 1, ARPA 2,
Right.
CIP
can-
reserve.
yep.
So,
We can recreate all of
Okay.
that
great.
very easily.
Jack.
One thing that I had not been thinking of as a potential bond until I heard Donna talking about this is, Donna mentioned that there's a real possibility to acquire the Elks Club land and develop housing there. And, wherever we want to go to put housing, at the Housing Task Force, we've been talking about the idea of proposing a land bank which is some system for the city to acquire real estate, which we would then make available to developers to put housing on. And you know, the place that we've identified for many years as a key potential place for housing development is Sabins Pasture. And if something like that is potentially on the table for bonding, I think that that's maybe worth thinking about. And I don't know if that was, I know that there's an owner of Sabins Pasture and that there's efforts been made to move forward on some kind of development, and we've done some zoning changes to facilitate that. But I think that might be worth looking at. Is another overall point about the bond is that I found it very encouraging to see the presentation, the two tables about the level of our indebtedness compared to our policy, because for the last few years, the level of debt's been going up and getting closer and closer to the policy. Now we can see the curve going the other direction, which, as I say, is encouraging for our capacity to take on some projects.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the bonds? Okay. I'm going to move on then, if that's all right. So moving on to talk about the budget. Go ahead, Bill.
If I may, just before you, I think you know where you're headed.
Yep.
Just so that everything's on the table, there were a couple more items that we got submitted
Oh, okay.
to just that are not in the budget that other groups put into us. I want to make sure that you had a chance to at least, I mean, you can do what you want with them, but one was the request for $30,000 from Arpa funds from Down Street for part of I think it was an alcohol treatment facility. One was $10,000 from the Conservation Commission.
Yep.
And
It's like a game show here. So yes, there were funds for the Conservation Commission to replenish some of their seed money for grants, because there was a large, well, about half of their 40,000 ended up going out to the Hubbard Park expansion project, and so they were, you know, wanting to request that they maybe get an infusion back of 10,000. And then there was the Parks Commission, who also put forward 5,000 to do parks management and community outreach and research specifically around the city's parks. And then I've got the Social Economic Justice Committee stipends, which was already mentioned, Down Street, which Bill mentioned. And then there's the municipal planning grant. We had put in to get it, and we haven't gotten it. It was a pretty competitive pool from what Mike Miller has reported out. It's of sort of over $850,000 for an available $443,000, and so it just didn't come our way. And so that's also $10,000 that's out there that really should be.
although we might be able to find that in this.
Yeah,
current
we can
budget.
probably, if you ask us to find it, we can do that. But I just wanted to highlight some of the things that have kind of come to pass, you know, that, you know, probably need a little consideration that weren't in this budget.
Sorry,
So at least the three that you hadn't mentioned were the 30,000 for Down Street, the 10,000 for Conservation Commission, and 5,000 for Parks.
Okay.
And the 10,000 we knew about when we did our budget. I don't know that we knew about the 5 or the 30.
We knew about the 10 and the 5, but
The
not
10 and
the
the
30.
5, but not the 30. So
And-
we opted not to include those, but just so you know that those were.
Okay, and so we don't need to worry about the
don't need to do
municipal
anything about it.
planning
The
grant?
planning grant, we got that covered.
Okay, all right. Okay. Whew. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 potential additions. to the list here, starting with the highest possible amount. If we did 42,000 for paying committee members, energy coordinator at like 100,000, lobbying firm at 15,000. We talked about more money for economic development, but I don't know if we had a dollar amount for
I
that.
would suggest that if we're going to do it, it would be another 50,000.
Okay, and 30 for the downstreet alcohol treatment. Is that's a facility or something?
It's housing.
Oh,
It's housing for recovering mother and children.
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah, it's not treatment, it's housing.
Thank you. Yes, that's
In the-
right.
yeah.
Okay. Transitional housing, yeah. Okay, and then 10,000 for Conservation Commission and 5 for Parks Commission. Kelly, this might, I don't know if this is an opportunity to project the Excel spreadsheet. If we did all of those things, then the increased value I'm looking at here is like 7.6%, up from 5.2. I'm less interested in going up that high, but that means not doing something. So I want to just take a straw poll on some of these things here. Well, actually, what I might propose with the paying committee members, I don't know how you'd feel about this, Lauren, being on that committee. If we narrowed the scope to just the committees that we have to have, and that we know how many people there are going to be. I don't know. What do you think about that?
The committee, when we were talking about this concept this morning, there were a few options, and Cameron, please jump in. I mean, understanding, so this was calculated at as if everyone's taking it for every single meeting and reaching these 5 particular committees as a starting place. I mean, I think the expectation is that a small portion of this money would be spent. So I think it could be scalable. Like we could put in less money and just figure out a way to roll it out so it's fully accessible to certain committees. And then if uptake isn't that high, we could, expand the committees or something. So I think we could be a little adaptive with it, and so I think there's some
flexibility
there, but
Okay.
getting it in and starting it would be, I think, really important.
Other thoughts? Is there general interest in having at least some level of paying committee members, or would anybody prefer to not do that one? Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Well, I guess I'm a little hesitant, and that's because we've done other things that was in that report. And hence, I thought, well, what if we just delay this one? I'm still nervous about our own recovery. I don't think, as we all know, we're not done with this virus and its mutations. And I felt that the body cameras were important, and I felt the social worker increase was important, and we put those in. And so I would just maybe want to stagger it a lot more, or wait till next year. I'm a minority. It's
Okay. Other. Yeah, the body cams and the other thing you mentioned were from the police review committee. This was from the equity
Oh, I'm
report.
sorry.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
She was on both.
Yeah, right. That's true. That's right.
Keep me in order. Keep me
Anyone
in order.
else sort of feeling like we shouldn't have some level of funding for that? Okay. Right, so we're in,
I-
oh yes, go ahead, Jack.
I'm just not sure how I feel. I know years ago, I used to come to the council every year and say, the council needs to raise how much the council gets paid because it's otherwise an economic impediment to serving. We have a lot of committees, and so I'm not sure. I'm just kind of on the fence about this. I'm not entirely sure. If we were going to do it, I'd almost be tempted to say, well, we'll just appropriate a dollar amount, and anyone who's on any city committee who could apply until the appropriation runs out. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it makes sense to me to say, well, how do we pick certain committees and not others?
Yeah. You know, I would almost propose, like, let's start with $30,000. How many committees could that cover? And to be fair, I would, like I said, I would start with the statutory ones, and then see, like, if we can crunch some numbers between now and the next meeting, see how that plays out. But start with something like 30,000, which is not the whole 42, but it's, I mean, talk about like an impediment to serving, that you're getting nothing now. So, you know, it'd be better than nothing. So I guess, and I start with that just as a place to like have a place to start. And like we can continue to tweak that number or change it or go back or whatever. I support that. But
Yeah,
just as a, yeah, go ahead, Jay.
No, I think that makes sense, and, you know, sort of call it a pilot project.
Yeah.
To see how it plays out. But I think ultimately the goal is to make the committees more accessible to our community. And so I would, you know, as we approach it, it would be to, you know, the reason we would do that is so that we could have a broader pool and a more diverse pool of folks who would participate. So that would be our benchmark as to whether it was successful or not. Did we figure out how to dole it out to the people who are already doing it?
Right.
If you know, because that clearly is a, you know, that administratively that's a challenge to how do we maintain equity and fairness and how we can distribute those funds. But at the same time, if it's successful if we've have a broader pool of folks who are willing participants, not just figuring out exactly how we distribute that money to folks who are already doing it. So that would be my perspective on how, and I'm fine with that 30K number to sort of, and with the statutory committees, I think that makes sense. But I just want that to be our mindset, not just how, you know, how it's distributed.
Okay. Moving on, another one that I heard was the lobbying firm hiring some lobbying. $15,000 you proposed. Thoughts? General, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down, where are we at? Yes, Lauren, go ahead.
I mean, I might be the other person who supported this previously, but I think I think this one will pay for itself. Like, just being someone who spends a lot of time at the State House, like, you don't know what you don't know if you don't have someone in the room. They whip through the budget so fast. They talk about opportunities, and having someone who's there with Montpelier's interest in mind and is just monitoring it. I think with so much money flowing around right now, like, I don't see almost any way we don't get that money back. And then some.
Other thoughts? Yeah, Jack.
As a lobbyist myself, I think that lobbying is of great value. And the last time we had it on, I think the reason it didn't make it eventually is that money was very tight, and we decided, rightly or wrongly, that this was a place not to go. But I don't have the sense that money is quite as tight this year, and I'd be inclined to probably do it.
Donna.
we're looking at the 7 things that all have substantial need, whether it's the stipend of any amount, the downtown housing for recovery moms and their kids, those particularly, and then the conservation and the parks. So I find, I'm not sure we have money for those. I find it very hard to put 15 for a lobbyist, because 15, I don't think is enough to keep them in the room. You're going to get a lobbyist, you're sharing with a lot of other groups. And if there's a conflict, which place do they go? Every organization I've worked with that shared a lobbyist at this level doesn't always have a person in the room. And I think we have a lot of ears there already. So I would not fund the lobbyists over these other things.
Go ahead, Connor.
Just to address that concern, a lot of the firms would have 10 lobbyists in the building, right? So somebody might be in the budget committee, somebody might be like in judiciary. It's not just one lobbyist stretched thin, it's multiple lobbyists looking there. And if they saw something, okay, this looks like something Chief Pete needs to get down for, they could give us a ring, we could do the work. But it's not somebody running from committee room to committee room. They're in there already, and they're in many committee rooms, like looking at this. So, yeah, so I just want to address that concern.
Other thoughts? This is something that I have, in the past anyway, not been in favor of, because probably because I feel very separate from that world and I don't fully understand it. But for $15,000, part of me is open to it, in that, like, let's try it and see. Can't believe I'm saying that, but we could try it and see if it does manifest.
I'm not trying to argue for or against it, but I have a question. It sounds like a lot of what we're talking about is for the session that's coming up in a month and a half.
Yeah,
Because this is
true. It's not going to take effect
next year.
Right.
So one of the questions would be, if we want to try it, should we see if we can scrape up? I can't promise that we can. We'd have to look. But is this more of an immediate need than waiting till 2023? And then, it's just a question.
Interesting question.
I'd be of the opinion, we'll definitely need it next year too, but
Right.
like you're saying, Bill, it's like, now is when the federal money's coming down.
Right.
It would be better to have them in the room starting in January, or, as soon as possible.
Well, especially given that circumstance, is that something that folks are interested in, at least seeing if we can find $15,000?
Sure.
It's worth a look.
Okay, it's worth a look. It's not the same question as,
Nope.
is it worth putting in the budget?
No, but it was the frame of reference. There's all this stuff happening
Yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. And It's
Right.
like, well, this isn't going to happen for a year from now, so.
Jay or Jennifer, any thoughts on that particular point? If not, that's fine.
No, just agree that find it. What does that mean? It's take it away from
Yeah,
from somebody
that's what
else,
it means.
try to prioritize. But this is a unique time and opportunity with the amount of federal dollars that are coming down. So I think
How about for?
it's worthwhile. And I think it's also worthwhile looking ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
For that amount, and agree with Lauren that it's the type of thing that could fairly quickly recoup itself, come back to us. So.
And I'll just say this, again, it's up to you whether at the end of the day, once you see the whole bottom line, you keep it. But if you did, and we tried it this year and we weren't happy, we can just use either if we decide by the end of January we don't want it, we could take it out of the budget, or we could have it in there and use it for some other purpose. So match one of those grant funds.
I'm going to move on from that one. I hope that's okay. I probably should have started with the requests that we got. Let's talk about the request from Down Street for $30,000 from potentially ARPA funds. Where are people at with that?
I support it. I don't know if there's any way to make any kind of partnership with the housing trust fund to reduce our share coming out of it or not, but
Interesting question. Jennifer?
I support it. It directly affect the communities that I work in, so.
Yeah, yeah. Other thoughts?
Support it.
You support it? Yep, Jack does, Lauren does, I do. Okay, so 30,000.
But,
Yeah.
so and that would be from ARPA 2?
ARPA two-
Presumably that would reduce the water sewer amount, at least for now, to 470.
Yes. Yeah, is that, okay, cool. Okay, so it's not, we're not adding it on. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. That's not, okay. Okay, and then the Conservation Commission's request to replenish some of their funds so they can have more available for grants. If I haven't captured that correctly, let me know, but thoughts on that one? Jack?
Is the proposal here not that it's to be used for a specific project or program at this time, but that they want to be able to respond to something that arises when it, without delay?
They had there's a long history to this. A number of years ago now, they had a conservation fund, a 1 cent for conservation. It was on the ballot one time, and I think it raised $60,000 or $70,000 at the time. And they've slowly dwindled that down, and they want to put some more money back into that fund. And obviously, it's up to you. I will tell you that was on the table for our budget deliberations and didn't make it into our recommendation. And because they're a commission, they ask to come directly, whereas other departments and things don't get to do that. So just.
But so the plan would be for them to not just use that small amount where they're asking for to spend on stuff, but to use it to leverage for other bigger projects?
To go into their fund to use as they see strategically as it goes forward. Yeah.
Thanks.
Lauren?
First of all, while we're on this, Alec, amazing work. Congrats on fundraising for the Hubbard Park expansion. That is amazing. Yes. Yay. Great job. One idea that it had come up a while ago around the ARPA 2 funds was going out to all of our commissions and committees and what is not included in the budget and what would requests and needs be, and have that be part of a public process. And I could see this as the kind of thing that could come up in that format, perhaps. The parks
Not
and
sure
the
how it would be eligible though.
It's for grants.
okay, so maybe
pretty
it's only
specific for water, sewer, certain income issues, broadband.
darn.
It's pretty. Yeah.
Sorry, remind me how they're funded already?
So typically they're in the budget. There's a small amount, what is it, $4,000 or $5,000, if that, $3,500 in the annual budget that they have, and if they don't use it, they lose it, right? That goes to the general fund. They don't accumulate that. And so that's really all they have, other than this one-time infusion of a conservation fund that they got a number of years ago now, and have slowly whittled it down. And I think they were looking to build that back up. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but there's a lot of ideas. So, but yeah, it's up to you guys.
If we gave them this money, does it go into a separate fund that does roll over? Right, so what do folks want to do? Do you want to put in?
I've got another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Are they in the budget this year for $3,500? And if they have not been spending it in recent years, and I don't know if they have been, but could we change that appropriation so that it does carry forward, so that if they don't use the money, they build it back up again? And Kelly, maybe you know if they've been spending it year by year.
Yeah, I mean, so we could certainly make sure it goes into the reserve. It's something that would just need to be set up that way. And I can definitely look into it for sure. And then, provide a recommendation and take action to make sure that happens if that's what you'd like to do.
Thanks.
It would also be good to know if they are in fact not consistently not spending the 3,500.
Okay.
If they are, and they're using it on valuable things, I hate to take that away, but I like where you're going with that. If they're not using it, yeah, let's.
Would you cap it? If it's a rollover, would you cap the rollover to a certain amount?
Or ask them to talk about what they're going to use it for if it gets over a certain amount, something like that, because, there are certain kinds of things that you may need to accumulate money over a few years before you're ready to do it. But I don't know enough about what they're doing to really know how to answer that.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Oh, I'm just noticing that Alec has his hand up somewhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Alec, go ahead. Thank you.
I'm the staff liaison to the Conservation Commission. I could give a little insight just for information. So the request is actually from the Conservation Fund Advisory Board, which is different than the Conservation Commission. The commission is a appointed group, and they have $3,500 to discretionary money. And the Conservation Fund Advisory Board is, I believe, 3 members of the Conservation Commission and 2 members of the public at large. And they have this pot of money that Bill's talking about to give out in grants. And so the advisory board is asking for the $10,000 and the commission gets the $3,500. So that's just the informational overview on those 2 entities.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
Can you tell us what they've spent it on? What the 10,000 or what they've had in the past?
Is that a question for me or Kelly or Bill?
Well, I thought maybe you would know, but she can echo you.
So I think the original bond was for $40,000, $45,000 maybe. And they just gave $20,000 toward this project, the Hubbard Park expansion project, as seed money. I don't know what else they've given it to. I think they might have paid for the city's natural resources inventory from 2007, but that also might have been out of the Conservation Commission. That was before my time.
Thank you.
And I don't suppose it's logical to have the Conservation Commission's unspent funds roll over into this fund, because it's, I mean, could we?
That's what I was kind of answering. So I was like, well, why can't we?
We could, okay. If that is the case, then do we want to change the amount? I mean, if they're, or are we saying like, you can, or should we just give them anything or wait till money rolls over? Or what do you want to do, team?
I mean, I'd be inclined to leave it off for now, until we go through the list. And maybe like,
come back to it.
A lot can change in a week. Maybe we'll get more information. Maybe there'll be some other mechanism to shift it around, but.
Okay, so leave it off for now.
Just
yeah, especially, that other thoughts. Okay, I'm happy to leave it off for now and revisit it another time, especially if we can look into rolling some funds over for them. Parks Commission outreach, $5,000. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I think that for all the work that Alec and the Parks Commission have been doing, especially in collaboration, leveraging a significant grant with Montpelier Alive to develop the branding around building a recreation-based economy. I think, you know, there's been some really good work done there. I don't know that this is specifically what they're looking for that $5,000 to help promote, but given the you know, given the work that they've done and that's been done, and the equity that's built up and ready to go, I think it's a pretty small drop in the bucket to be able to leverage a lot of really good work, existing work. So it seems to me like it's small enough that it makes a lot of sense to include.
Donna giving us a thumbs up. Connor, thumbs up. You know, something that I like about this is it's so, it feels specific.
Yeah.
I got you.
That helps. So I'm getting the sense that we're leaving that one in for now. A couple others, so that I'm kind of leaving the bigger ticket things to the end here. Energy coordinator, which could be on the scale of $100,000 if it was a whole position. Actually, and just for context, let me just see where we're at right. Oh, you've got it up there already. So 30, 15 parks. So we're at 5.7 right now. And if we added in 100,000 for energy coordinator, what would that put us at? 6.7. Okay. Thoughts, team? Is there general interest?
I would just ask, so this would be an ongoing, it's 100,000 every year, right? It's not a one time?
I think that's the idea, yeah. Jack?
I like the idea, and I like the idea of we're saving, that this could very well pay for itself. We also know, though, that I think the next item on the list is add another full-time social worker. Am I right?
I thought that was already in, or no? Am I?
So it's
am I
half in,
wrong?
half out. So let's finish this one first. So we can always get the full list up there and see.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I'd misunderstood something. That's also
So
possible.
the police review committee, we have a half-time social worker now.
Right,
The police review committee recommended, and we have a half-time peer worker. So they recommended adding 1.0 full-time social worker and
Yep.
another half-time peer worker.
yeah,
So that would be a total of 1.5 FTE.
Right.
This budget only has a 0.5 FTE.
okay, for some
So
reason
it's
I thought
expanding the
both.
half-time social worker to full-time. With
Okay.
presumably the half-time still shared, well, I mean, we presumably would have half of it shared with Barry, and then we'd have our own half-time.
Okay.
Or however that would work. So there is still 1.0 recommended from the police review committee that's not funded in this budget.
Okay, for a social worker.
Well, half for social worker,
Half
half
for,
for peer worker.
okay, so half for social work, half for
However,
peer outreach, is that what we're calling? Okay.
go ahead.
And so that's what I'm saying. Oh,
Okay,
that's what I'm saying, that we've got that, and
We're
we
gonna
might
get
as
the
well.
correct answer now.
Okay.
I also wanted to remind all of y'all that you have approved and there is funding for the homelessness task force. And one of their projects that you recently approved for this year is to continue hiring additional peer support workers through our partnership with Good Sam. And I anticipate, but cannot confirm, that will probably continue to be part of their funding allocation, that they use their 45,000, which was included in this budget, to continue that for fiscal year 23. So I want that also to be part of this conversation.
so thank you. So you're anticipating that may go towards either the half peer outreach person or the half social worker?
And I understood,
outreach,
I
yes,
understood
peer outreach, okay.
the committee to recommend an additional half beyond the half we already have. Is that right? Or
Right.
just
and
a half?
So many halves.
We can check. We can
Yeah, go ahead,
confirm.
Lauren.
They're actually, the most recent conversation of the police review committee, and Jack, jump in if I'm misremembering, but there actually was an ongoing conversation of among the kind of service providers of like, what is the right balance between, what the city is currently funding, what the needs are that they're seeing in terms of like how to allocate this. So they were actually going to come back with a recommendation. So if we had, funding, if we've done in the homelessness task force line item, some increased funding plus the half FTE. I mean, I think it's all like positive steps towards it, and it wasn't definitive, like it must be one full FTE peer support and this. It was a little squishier than that, but they were doing some work to get some definition, and Chief Pete might be able to provide some more context because he's the one who's part of that conversation.
So, yeah.
And some of us did get an email from Dan Towell, who's one of the members of the Police Review Commission, but it looks like it was me, maybe not Lauren, Bill, but a few people suggesting, I hope we can be creative and resourceful to collaborate to find funding for the 1.0 FTE portion of the 1.5. So at least there's some movement to still put in the full 1.5 that the police commission asked for. So I'm just, when I talked about the energy coordinator, I'm just thinking, well, it could well come down to where do we want to put our 100,000? At column A or column B?
Yeah, yeah.
Throw in economic development, you get the column C.
There you go. Yep.
I'm just,
Yeah. Well, and, I guess we could think about this almost in 50,000 increments because,
well,
go ahead.
Well, I did have an idea. I was actually thinking about it with both the energy coordinator and the economic development. We talked about this a few years ago, but we could leave the $50,000 in for the economic development, and instead of using it the way we planned, is basically say we're gonna assume we're gonna bring on a person, but we wouldn't do it till halfway through the fiscal year. So it would be knowing that the following year we're on the hook for the whole thing, but it would get it started. We could do the same thing, presumably with the energy coordinator, is say, look, yeah, we want one yesterday, but a year from now we'll be hiring someone. It's half in, and then we'll be full time year before if money got tight. That's a way to open the door to the commitment without paying, just delay the hiring. So,
Or do we just hire a half-time
well, that's also possible.
person?
To do that.
Also,
That could be the other option,
right.
one or the other.
Donna, go ahead.
Do we have a staff member now that's doing some partial time with building maintenance?
So our assessor was, we were hiring, he was doing maintenance coordination an extra day a week, but he's cut that back. And he's actually hoping to cut it all back. He wants to retire. We need to find an assessor.
I mean, at one time, we thought about connecting the two.
Yeah, we
energy
talked about a
coordinator and building
sustainability
maintenance.
facilities coordinator, and we went a different direction, and so now we don't have that, and we could go back, we probably do need to go back to that. So.
Yeah, I think especially if we're serious about our net zero 2050 goal for the whole community. I mean, we've had a lot of conversation about the 2030 goal, and we've got a roadmap, we've got good progress, this is within our domain. But there are still things that need to be done, as Lauren pointed out, but it's almost like we haven't even touched the 2050 goal. And so, we've got to, I think if nobody is dedicated to doing that, it won't happen, because it can't rely on a group of volunteers to make that happen. And I will just say, like, I'm open to any of the options that include it somehow. Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of this being, Jack mentioned a placeholder, and then we can flesh out, the energy coordinator might be combined with some other, at least the first year, and then keep moving in that direction.
Yep. I mean, so what I've got in my spreadsheet right now is 50,000 for an energy coordinator, 50,000 for economic development, and
A
50,000.
new 50,000 in addition to the 50 we already have?
Well, I guess we can talk about that. That's sort of up for discussion, and then 50 for the half social worker. If it was an additional 50 for each of those things, that I think puts us at 7.1%, which is starting to get a little bit out of the palatable. Like, I would like to keep it below 7. Does anybody else have ballpark percentages that they would like to keep it within, or not? I mean, if it's a separate comment, go ahead.
I mean, I guess just answering that question, I agree, 7 starts feeling uncomfortably high. I mean, one thing, and I know that we absolutely cannot count on this, but I was having a conversation with some appropriations committee members in the House who expressed interest in funding peer outreach work, and we're looking at Montpelier as an exciting model, and said we should be helping fund the work that you all are doing. So I think our newly hired lobbyist that we're going to scrape for the money for this year, I do think there's interest in that. I have not heard a similar thing around the energy coordinator. Like, I know there's staff they're hiring at the RPCs, for example, to help connect communities to some of these energy dollars that are out there. But it's not the same thing as having, your own community doing it. So even though I strongly support the peer support outreach, I feel like we're moving in that direction and should make a pitch for the state to be supporting that.
So are you suggesting that we keep it in and then are able to take it out once we get money for it, or are you suggesting something else? Or
I guess I might suggest, although I'm not at all wedded to this, of in that particular instance, sticking with the staff budget pieces that's growing that program. We're growing it in 2 ways already, with the homelessness task force allocation and increasing the social work line item, and then looking for opportunities to grow it further in the coming year with state funding.
So you would not add an additional half here because we're already expanding it, and if we can, because we have the money, then we would. That's what you're suggesting. Okay. All right, so that takes that out for me. So without that, that's 6.7%.
50,000 for energy.
Yeah. At least that's what I have for now. Can we talk about the economic development part of this? I know I sort of was like, oh yeah, 50,000, an additional 50,000. Is that the right number? How are you feeling about that? I'm not wedded to any particular number there.
It totally baffles me when we didn't support the group that we had with even 50, 75. I would oppose it. I think 50,000 is a good placeholder. And if indeed we gain some momentum, but we're doing a lot of things with housing, with the parks, to bring people in. And that's the driver that I think we really need, because people are needed for the businesses we have now. And that will make our economy stronger than, I think, searching out new businesses.
All right, so I just want to comment on that, and what you want to do is what you want to do. Just to the part that we didn't even support the group we had. We did support them to the tune of $375,000. $375,000, I think, was what it was. It was at least 3 or 4 full years at $100,000 each, and then the last year we reduced it a little bit, and then in the current budget we put 0, but that's because we knew they were going away, or that they had this full sum of money. So, and I think one of the reasons we didn't support them was we had provided a pretty sizable sum of money to them. They had a big reserve, and we hadn't seen the return that we were necessarily hoping for. So, I I think one of the questions is if we were to refund at that level, would we do it differently? Would we bring it in-house and have our own person or a contract, do it with someone like Montpelier Alive that's more established? So I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, but it would be a different model. But I'm not sure it's to say we didn't fund them because we weren't interested in economic development. I'm not sure that's the equation there.
But they finally changed their model because they had terrible success with their lack of success with their executive directors. And they went the model that we're now thinking about instituting,
Well-
hiring people to help us do jobs. But
Yeah.
Only on an
I-
interim
I think-
basis.
I would stick with the 50,000.
Well, and because there's already 30,000 for economic
The
development.
50 is in the budget now.
50 is in the budget, so an additional 50
We
that we're
could hire a
proposing, we'd
full-time
get to
person.
hire somebody full-time. So that's what we're saying? Okay, or we could keep it, well, yeah, okay. Right. Is that what we want to do? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm still not convinced an in-house economic development position is the way to go. And once you hire somebody for that, it's harder to
ongoing.
eliminate the position
Mhm.
once you bring them on board. So I'd still like to talk about other options, maybe in the $50,000 range.
Like keeping the 50,000 that we have?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods. Should we keep the 50,000 or, I'm sorry. Do we want to add anything more to the 50,000 that is in the budget already? Donna's saying no. I'm seeing some shaking heads. Oh, okay.
For
Go
what it's
ahead,
worth,
Jay.
I mean, I'm inclined to leave it at, not add another 50.
Okay.
I mean, well, not yet. I
Okay.
think that, meaning by that, I mean, I think as a city, we need to invest in economic development. I think that, allocating $50,000 that, Bill and staff could use to, pursue opportunities is great. One thought would be, like Bill said, would be to, if we took that 50 and hired somebody part-time or hired somebody to say, to start on January 1st, 2023. Part-time maybe, but if we hired somebody if we wanted the right person for the job, we would have to hire them, not, hey, we've got 6 months and then we'll decide again later.
Right.
That's just not going to work. And so, and I think that was one of the challenges that Montpelier Development Corp was up against. They had this sort of set budget anyways, but that's a whole nother conversation. So I do like having that money and then investing it in updating the economic development report, and then using it on an as needed basis, and then having further conversations around how do we make it more permanent within city structure. I personally am an advocate for having somebody on staff to be able to take on that work and have the autonomy and to do it. But if it's we're up against the limits of adding funds to this budget, I feel like we're not necessarily at a point that we can do that just yet. So
Okay.
so it would not be an additional 50.
Yeah, considering that we're coming up from nothing from last year, that does feel like a substantial change, good progress, and I think we could reevaluate whether we wanted to add an additional 50 for the following year. So, all right, we're at 6.2 right now. I might make the pitch that we put the energy coordinator in at 100 now, but willing to sit.
What else was on the block?
Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, did we talk through everything that's on your? I mean, we talked through all the things that I had on my list.
What I haven't found yet is charging station
Oh, charging station.
but
We're going to try to do that in capital, no?
we'll try to do that in capital, but it might mean something's got to go, so we have to figure out what that was.
Lauren.
I mean, that is one where Vermont's getting $21 million for EV charging stations. I have no idea how that money will flow and how quickly that'll come, or if we would definitely get one, but I mean, I know we want to get the infrastructure in place so that we, like, if we're buying the equipment at the same time. But, so, but I don't know, just to note that that was like one of the specific line items in the infrastructure bill that recently passed.
Yeah, Jack.
How much does a charging station cost?
Well, see, that's a question I had heard.
And said.
Right, right. So it must be
What I
true.
heard
And said 50,000.
I said 50,000, but I,
Fast it charges, right?
well, it is, right? Because the thing is, like, if we just needed to charge, you know, once a day, then you probably get away with a level 2. And those are they're slower, but they're much cheaper, like significantly cheaper. But a level 3 charging station, I had heard that it was anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
What are they called?
Level 3 fast
Everyone's-
chargers.
Everyone's on their Google machines looking for the price.
Yeah, right. So yeah, 50,000 plus average cost.
And does that assume that we would get some participation in the cost from Green Mountain Power? And I don't know if we
I don't know.
would, but
This is one that I think we probably need a little bit more research on.
Mhm.
So maybe
Well,
this
yeah,
is,
we can keep looking at it. That was the only other thing that was on.
oh,
the
that
list
was
I
on
was
your,
looking at.
on your radar, okay. Well, so it looks, I'm glad to hear that we kind of have a cap, it sounds like, of at least somewhere around 7%, which, to be fair, I mean, one of the reasons that that's a cap for me is thinking about it in terms of, you know, we had a nearly flat budget last year, and so 3% is a digestible number, and so thinking about it in terms of, like, it's effectively 3% last year and 3% this year.
That number, you're right, it's just about right at inflation too.
Oh yeah, well,
So
right,
you're,
yeah,
that's also pretty sellable.
right. Just, yeah, okay. Actually, before you go, I just want to note, I do want to just check in with folks that, see if people are up for an energy coordinator position at 50,000, but pause on that. Go ahead, Connor.
No, I was just gonna ask where the school's at.
And I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. I think they're talking about it. Well, I shouldn't speculate. I don't know. But thoughts on energy coordinator at 50,000. Lauren, go ahead.
Just curious, does the school employ any sustainability person, or is it
No.
just their facilities?
They just have a facilities.
I
manager.
would prefer that we put it in at 100, the energy coordinator. I think it'll be a great investment. If we end up really stuck, I'm just thinking, like, between the schools, there are examples where multiple communities have partnered on one of these positions. Like, so I think we could get creative if we need to. I think somebody full-time would be awesome. It's like what I would love to strive for. And just throwing that out there, that I would hate to wait and do it. So we're talking, you know, January 2024 that someone's starting, and we've missed, you know, there's all these, like, opportunities coming up soon. So I hate to put it off if we do like the 50,000 and wait for half of the year to go by.
Jennifer, did I see your hand?
Yes. Wow. Rude. Could somebody explain to me what the energy coordinator would do?
Yes. Do you want to take a stab at Lauren, or should I? Okay. Yeah, so there are a number of things that they could potentially do. So we have a district heat plant that provides, you know, wood chip powered heat to municipal buildings. It needs a business plan and ideally more customers, but it hasn't really fallen to anybody to manage that. So that's one big piece of it. Another is, and this is typical for energy coordinators that work in other places, thinking about particularly projects that are within the scope of the city, of like efficiency or fuel switching, that they could help be basically like managing those projects and make sure that they go forward. Because right now, like just as an example, the like the police building was at one point, it needed a new air conditioning system, and it was a huge energy hog, but there was no person that was sort of in charge of looking at, okay, well, so if we need a new air conditioning, what should it be? What's the most efficient thing? And also, nobody was looking necessarily at the time, except for the energy committee, at oh my gosh, this is a huge energy suck right now. And so how do we bring that down? Do we need more insulation? Do we need, oh gosh, this button is stuck on, things like that. So having somebody whose job it is to be vigilant about that for the city. We have a green revolving loan fund for the city where basically we're borrowing from ourselves to do these projects. And we know that there are more projects out there, but to have someone who could suggest, okay, this is the next best use of this money, that would be, that would be valuable. And then thinking of, so there's the within the city sort of, when I say the city, within city operations, within the, like municipal operations, but then, looking beyond that to the commitment that we've made to reach net zero energy for the community by 2050.
That's my next question.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So, gosh, that means a lot of different things. And so how do we start moving that direction? So that person could also potentially be looking at what's working in other cities and say, you know what, this would be a policy that we could potentially implement here. I can think of like a number off the top of my head, but I'm sorry, I have a lot to say about this. Is that there's all these potentials. We've had this conversation about the home energy information ordinance. Someone could be sort of managing that.
Okay.
I'll stop.
No. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That was very specific, and you answered all the things that were going on in my brain as far as keeping us green or moving us into a greener space. So thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
I mean, to me, one of the things that seems most exciting, like given the moment we're in about having this position, it's, so we can look at the city operations. I think there's tons of opportunity, but there's also like rolling out all of this money for community members. So for example, low-income weatherization programs, which for years have been underfunded and there's been long wait lists. Now, I mean, they put 25 million into weatherization last year. So the wait lists, the last I heard from someone recently, don't quote me on it, but that the wait lists are going away right now because there's finally enough money. So, if we could be educating community members about what's available, I mean, this is something that could just be saving people money on their monthly energy bills, which is a huge burden for a lot of families. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities in someone just being able to stay on top of it and then do that outreach. Even thinking of the home energy ordinance, like somebody who could be in charge of implementing that, helping people. I mean, it's been tough with our current staffing structure to make that work seamlessly. But I would be really excited for how we could also be benefiting the community with the position.
Other thoughts? Jack, go ahead.
I like the idea. I would like to, I would put it in for now and have it for more discussion. We might not stay in at this level, but if we were to go $50,000, I would be inclined to start it as a full-time position halfway through the year rather than ask someone to try to do it as a half-time job, because I think there's probably enough work there to have someone be doing it full-time and probably save their salary.
Yeah. So just so I'm clear, you're okay with it at 100,000 for now? We could revisit it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Donna, your thumbs up. Other thoughts? Thumbs up. You don't have to weigh in if you don't want to.
I love the idea. I'm just trying to balance it against
Yeah.
everything else. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's more than a full-time job. You know, of all the things I just heard that could be done, that's a staff, right? That's a new department, you know, so, you know, and I don't really mean to be facetious, but at the same time, it's, if we approach this as like, hey, if we throw $100,000 at this, we want one person to do all these things, is that realistic? You know, who's that person and what are they good at doing? And how are we getting the best return on that investment? So I'm more than happy to keep it in, and you know, conceptually, I love the idea. But again, I'm just trying to understand how we can get the best return on that investment, and how are we putting it, you know, relative to other things that we're funding or not. That's all. So happy to have more conversation about it.
Go ahead, Jack.
On another topic, so I'll wait until we're done with the energy coordinator.
I think we may be done with that particular topic, and which I just want to note before you go, that as we're at 6.7 right now, that was, as far as I know, the whole list. And so I think we're approaching done with this conversation, which is very exciting. Go ahead.
You know, I think I'll wait and I'll talk to Donna before our next meeting and maybe talk about something else then.
Okay.
We might want to put the CVPSA on the bottom of there too, just to realize that that's, would you say that was for, oh, you've already added it in?
It's already added in.
Oh, it's up. No, it isn't.
I don't think
It's not?
No, it is.
I think 14 was
14? I put it in mine.
No, it wasn't on this one.
Oh, what percentage are you at now? 6.7. Okay, that's what I had too. Okay.
Yeah, it's still 6.7.
Isn't that 14,100 from CVPSA basically what's left over from the pandemic relief from this year? I'm not saying we can use, I don't know that we can use that leftover money for that.
It's like a magic trick.
It's late.
It's going to pay for the lobbyists.
Oh dear. Okay, well, knowing that we will have more conversation about this, feels like we have a good start, a good foundation. Well, to be fair, I think we started with a good foundation, and I think we're closer to a final number, which is excellent. Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
I know that you stated earlier that we're mainly having tonight for council members, but
Yes.
if, you know, Vicky Lane had her hand up for a long time, if she's still there, and I'm not seeing her anymore.
No, she's still
Okay.
there.
I would like to give her a chance
I
to be
agree.
heard.
I agree. Vicky Lane, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes. I just want to bring a little reality to you all. Pertaining to those of us that are low income and effective low income decreasing homeowners. Next month, my mortgage payment goes up $100, due entirely to the taxes. Has absolutely nothing to do with my interest rates. I'm in the 28th year of a 30-year mortgage, and it's going up entirely because of property taxes. I don't know where all this money is that you guys seem to think is flowing freely, but it sure as hell isn't flowing freely to people like me. You're talking about another increase in property taxes. And I'm not sure how much more I can afford. $100 more a month going to my mortgage company for property taxes is a major deal to me, considering the fact that the cost of absolutely everything has gone up significantly. Every item of food, gas, heating oil, everything. And you guys were sitting there for the last 2.5 hours, 3.5 hours, talking about everything you can add into this thing. And I just, I don't know what you guys expect of us, but I can't afford it. And I'm sure I'm not the only person in the city of Montpelier that's sitting here looking at those figures and looking at that percentage go up, knowing you're doing a reappraisal and God only knows what you're going to do to my taxes after that. And looking at this and saying, well, you know, $100,000 for a person is a hell of a lot of money. For somebody like me who lives on less than $30,000 a year and is a homeowner, with medical bills and everything else that are not covered, then I just think you guys are missing the boat here. There isn't a single one of you, it seems, a single one of you on that council that has any idea what it's like to be a low income, fixed income, effective fixed income declining, what it's like to be somebody like that. And there's tons of us around. And we're the ones that work hard to pay our taxes and get everything done. And I just don't understand. I mean, I've been sitting here doing a slow boil, especially when you all started to laugh and say, oh yeah, well, let's up this up. Oh, I can handle 6.7%, but God forbid it shouldn't go to 7. Well, that's 0.3% underneath 7%. And I know that the city of Montpelier voters always vote absolutely everything in. But there's an awful lot of us have-nots out there that are really struggling to stay in Montpelier and survive. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Vicki. I think that's an important reminder. A couple of thoughts here. Lauren, go ahead.
We were just hoping to get your district for the record, Vicki.
District
Yep.
3.
Okay.
Thanks.
And Jennifer.
I'm getting confused because I'm seeing the mute thing on here, but I know I'm not muted. Vicki, I live in District 3 and I'm a renter and I struggle as well. And I hear you. And I can't afford to buy a home in Montpelier because of the taxes. So I hear you. And I am.
There is no way.
Oh, hang
that
on,
I could even
Vicki.
rent.
Let's let Jennifer finish her thought. Go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know that, I am a struggling mother of 2 and living on a fixed income myself. And, as part of the reason why I wanted to be on the commission is because I'm not a homeowner and I don't make a lot of money and I struggle. And so if you would like to have a conversation with me, I would love to chat with you.
Great. Thank you. All right. And anyone, since I've given an opportunity for people online to speak, anyone in person want to share? Go ahead.
In the interest of the hour, I will save some of mine for a future, but what I want to do is encourage you to not postpone your public hearing till January. I know there's a state law that Senator Polina got passed. The management department is required by statute to engage a meaningful process with the public in the formation of the budget. And I feel like that if you wait till January, y'all's decisions are all baked in and it's an insurmountable hurdle for the public to try to change them at that late date. So I would encourage you to open this up meaningfully at this stage, because all I heard was a lot of ads. I didn't hear any opportunity to talk about a lot of cuts or where money is being squandered or wasted. And I relate to Vicki's comments that we need to I mean, I know we need a new radio system. I'll argue that we need much more money in the CVPSA planning budget. But we also don't need unplanned police radios in the tens and tens of thousands when we don't even know whether they're going to repeat both the fire and police frequencies. So there's so much that's not well considered here. That I have several pages of notes, but at this late hour and with this limited opportunity, I would ask you to sooner open this up for specific areas where they could be cut and invite the public in on that discussion, as well as, I mean, this is a good year to do a level fund, to not add 5, or 7. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to review the schedule, so I'm looking at our next meeting is 12/22
Next Wednesday.
next Wednesday, and
That's a regular meeting, but we will have budget on the agenda.
and
So, and then we can, depending on where you're at, we have a workshop like this scheduled for the 5th, which again would be budget only. And again, it's up to you all to what degree you want to engage others. And then we're into the next 2 meetings are the January 12th and the 20th. And the 20th is the deadline that we have to be done. And so the public hearings are usually on the 12th and the 20th. And you have traditionally changed budgets right up until the 20th. So after public hearings.
my anticipation for next week. So when I see workshop in the description of what we're doing, that's why I'm like, okay, so we're going to prioritize council discussion, but I'm glad that we did get to hear from the public too, even those after. But next week being the budget review, I'm anticipating that if folks have comments on the budget, that we might start with that. And then go into a conversation about basically the review of the budget. And then I'll leave it up to you all as to whether or not you want to do another budget workshop, but you would have public.
And that could be a workshop or a review, however, or if you reach a preliminary decision next week, then you don't need it. You go straight to the public hearing.
Exactly. Then we go straight to the public hearings. Does that process sound okay, team? Any thoughts? Okay, so we will have opportunity for public comment at the next meeting. At least that's my anticipation. There's other things on the agenda as well. I think we're still inviting our legislative delegation, and we have an audit report next time. So anyway, there's other things. It won't be just dedicated to this. Oh, sorry.
Unfortunately, just to update on the audit, we still have not received our draft statements yet, and
Okay.
not from a lack of trying. We're working on that, so likely you'll get them before you vote it out officially, but it probably will be January.
Okay. Yes, Jack.
Sorry.
How much notice do we have to give for public hearing?
We're just required to hold them. It's not like it's not like zoning, so
Okay.
we just warn them as public hearings. You have to conduct, and actually, it's not even clear that you need to hold official public hearings for the budget. We just have traditionally done that. We do have to have a bond public hearing prior, more than a certain number of days, and then another one within so many days.
Because I just think, thank you, that's helpful. I think that I understand and support the value of getting a lot of public input realistically. Making it happen before our meeting on January 5th means trying to get people to come to a meeting in the week between Christmas and New Year's, which I don't think is calculated to get very much public input. So I still support the schedule that we established a
Yeah.
month or so ago.
Well, and I just for some context too, I think other councils work very differently than our council does. My understanding is that other bodies, if it doesn't say public hearing, then they don't have to take public comment on it necessarily, except potentially during general business and appearances. And so I think, the fact that we're required to do that is maybe like a reflection of that, even though we treat most things with this body as effectively public hearings because we welcome public comment. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And it's 10:10. We should be done. Yes.
I'm sorry that the public felt left out, but this kind of workshop is really important for me as a council member.
Yeah.
It's the only way we get a perspective of one another and to think about another person's point of view on the council. So, and here it is after 10 with just us talking. And we do get a little silly, but it's stressful. And so, but we're also just understanding one another. So these workshops are very valuable. And the next meeting, we can share.
Yep.
That's great. But we needed this meeting to have something for the public to talk about.
And as Bill said, we can and do change things, up until the last minute. All right, so we're going to move on then, because I think we're in a good spot with that, so we can wrap that up. So on to council reports. Are you okay to go there, Donna?
Oh, sure. I just would, one thing is sort of a housekeeping. I've had 2 calls this last week about me being on the homeless task force, and they said they found on the website. I've never knowingly been appointed to that committee. I know Casey, but Connor doesn't. Connor Casey, said your last name.
3 years.
Oh, my name was Richard is lucky. So I would like that looked at, but I also, maybe all of us, the one list I saw was in 2021, but I know we did another appointment. And so there's an email that has all that on there, and I've just missed it, because I missed a couple meetings when you were doing appointments, and I apologize.
But we didn't put you on the homelessness task force.
Jennifer, are you on?
I'm on it, but I still am not getting any emails, and I didn't send an email to you.
Okay.
I've been sending them to your Montpelier address. Is that not coming through?
I didn't get anything for this meeting.
Something to,
It's okay, but.
yeah.
And thank you for adding my debate speaking Gmail. It helps me get stuff. And I really, really appreciate it. Kelly, thank you, thank you. And I would like you to know that it has been very frustrating to have in-person remote meetings here for the Public Safety Authority. And generally speaking, it's just been myself and Stephen. And it's been very hard to contain using city equipment. I'm focusing on the remote. I share my laptop. No one else on the Public Safety Authority board wants to be live. And it's also been an issue for our secretary has decided not to come, both for health reasons and for the fact that Stephen's rather interruptive. And it's hard. And I apologize for any level of rudeness of you, Stephen, but it's hard when someone keeps talking to you on the background when you're trying to deal with the meeting. So I would just like to say that we've opted not to try to use the city equipment. It's generous of you to offer it, but I don't have anybody willing to come in and manage it. And I'm sitting over there on a computer. I can't deal with somebody over here touching the equipment if I can't find somebody to control any of the other in-person people. So anyway, thank you, but we are just going to stay with the required audio for now. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank
Connor.
you, city staff, for all your hard work, but otherwise passing. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Jennifer.
I'm good this time.
Lauren. Okay, and I just want to acknowledge that I've gotten a lot of emails about Shaw's with the mask compliance, and if I understand correctly, we may be taking up some amendments to the mask policy potentially at our next meeting. So just to anticipate that. Anything else that we want to say about that?
Well, I'll do that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, that's it for now for me. Actually, it's John on here.
I don't think so.
I don't see him. Okay,
I
so
think we
he,
told them we'd do notes for him.
okay, great. So Bill, go ahead.
So a couple of things, as the mayor mentioned, so we have had a lot of comments about Shaw's, and we are, following up with them. One of the challenges that we've not observed is anyone that works for Shaw's being without their mask, but certainly many customers are, and they're not turning them away at the door. And, as it was last time, that's a difficult position to put them in. We can talk, you can talk if you want next week, whether to add monetary fines. That is allowed in the statute. We opted not to in the proposal to try to see how that worked. And that could be for the violating individual and or the business. Specifically, there was an article in the paper that highlighted, in fact, at the last meeting, we passed a mandate that took out the part about someone being alone. And at the same time, we passed a city policy that said if you're working alone at your desk and all this stuff, it's okay. So we had, we had contradictory things. So we're going to try to, and it goes beyond just city employees. If you think about if you're a store owner and you've got a back office, technically under our mandate, you're supposed to be, because your business is open to the public, you're supposed to be masked even if you're alone in your own office. So we're going to try to make that more realistic and more in line with so we'll have a draft amendment on that. And then if you wish to do anything else with enforcement, we're certainly happy to talk about that. So there's that. We do have the legislators next week in our legislative agenda. I was trying to think what else we had just queue up. I mentioned this to the mayor, but I'll just say it. This is early, but because the mayor will be out a bit in January, just remind people that I do have my review comes up in February, and this is a year that my contract expires, so we would want to talk about that. So that's all. Be thinking about that. Normally, we don't talk about that till we kind of finish this process, and we're into January, and the mayor coordinates all that, but she may be out.
So we should connect about that.
There's that.
All right, our
and
evaluation on a Christmas card.
there you go. With a lump of coal. That's fine.
Yeah.
Or pellets.
What's that?
Wood pellets.
Wood pellets. I could use those. I just bought a pellet stove.
There you go. There you go.
That's
Great.
all.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
So
is there anything else? Anything else I'm supposed to tell them? No.
No, you're good.
okay, great. Well, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And so without objection, we are going to adjourn at 10:18. Thank you very much.